Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. Get me on this American exceptional sort of guy. I super disagree,
Yeah.
but not without much knowledge. So I want you to argue against this. I'm curious, okay?
I grew up in a staunchly anti-NATO, anti-American family, and I believe I'm
determined that you are actually, factually, in the wrong in this particular thing. That
Would you be in favor or against America saying, you guys, we're going to get them anyway?
Oh, man. I'm not gonna have a good answer. I don't have a strong answer. I'll just talk you through it. My gut says.
Yeah. Well, should I introduce myself? Or?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm finishing my PhD in international law. I've been lecturing now for 3.5 years in international law as well in a university here in Spain. I wouldn't like to give more identifying information than that, but that's about,
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So I heard you a while back ago, like 2 weeks ago, on a stream, struggling a bit with I don't know, maybe it was the International Court of Justice or international treaties and stuff, and I was like, let me shoot him an email,
Yeah.
because I've been watching you since 2018 from the sidelines. I'm not a very online person, but you're one of the few persons I consistently watch, and yep. That's where we are.
I mean, obviously, studying for a PhD. I mean, who are you going to watch? Hassan or Vosh? I mean, let's be real. But yeah, okay, go ahead.
True. Yeah. So you asked me to prepare a couple of topics, but I prepared a bunch more. So whatever you're interested. One was the naval blockade in Gaza. The other one was the crime of apartheid. The other one was the genocide. Then I prepared a little bit on general whether Palestine can be considered a state according to international law. And then there are a couple of one ICJ judgment and one ICC judgment that I feel like are very important, and no one is talking about them right now. And so whatever you want to begin with, I'm happy with.
Well, I mean, whatever. How about let's start with the I guess like the embargoes for. Let's start with the embargo on the Gaza Strip. Can I ask questions and then you can kind of.
For sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, go ahead.
No. I was gonna say I have a bunch of references and materials. I don't know how much detail you wanna. I can send you links and articles and treaties and stuff. But yeah, I'll try and keep the answer short if I can.
Okay. Wait, what the fuck? I just realized. Okay, my first question for you is basically going to be, there is an embargo between Israel and the Gaza Strip, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean, well? Were you going to contradict something there or what?
Well, kind of, yes, because embargo is generally used in non-conflict, non-war situations. Although you can talk about embargoes in the context of World War II.
Okay.
We generally talk about blockade.
Okay, blockade. There's a blockade might be better to say, right?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a blockade. First question is, if I want to find out if this blockade is legal, where do I even start? Who do I ask? Do I ask the ICJ? Do I ask the United Nations? Where would I even go if I would be like, oh, is this blockade legal? Can a blockade be legal or illegal? What does that even... Actually, let's start there. What does it mean for the blockade to be legal or illegal?
Right. So I think I would have to begin by what is international law, which I think is a way broader topic than we can cover today. But
okay.
We're talking about international law here. It's not about the domestic law of Israel or the domestic law of the Palestine National Authority, whatever that is. It's about international law. So the law of nations, that's the old-fashioned way of putting it, right? And inside of international law, there are different regimes or areas of specialty, you can say, right? So one would be the law of war or international humanitarian law, the law applicable to armed conflict, right?
Okay.
And then there's the law of human rights, which you can argue the law, international humanitarian law is a subset of human rights, which is applicable to cases of armed conflict. And then there's, for instance, the law of the sea.
Wait. I'm so sorry. I just changed my mind. Hold on. Okay.
Yep.
You're a lecturer. All right.
Yeah.
You're giving me information.
Sorry.
I'm going to be a good student and I should be taking notes. That's what I should be doing. Okay. I'm just going to call this thing international.
way better than most of my students already.
Fuck yeah. Okay. All right. I should just be, so I can track my thoughts on this. Okay. So general notes. Okay. So the first question is addressing the legality of a blockade. Okay. More specifically, a blockade is like during wartime or armed conflict. Okay. So the first question is, so I'm asking, who even has, I guess, broadly speaking, what we're really talking about is like jurisdiction on this, right? And then your response is, yeah, what do we look at for this sort of stuff? Or you wanted to make it more broad about like what is international law or whatever. Yeah, okay. So go ahead.
For that, one would be the applicable law. Second would be who has jurisdiction. And third would be how to enforce that set of laws.
Okay,
right?
first is applicable law. The second was, what did you say?
Jurisdiction.
Okay. When you say applicable law, I'm guessing you're talking about like the laws of the nations involved of this?
No.
No? Okay,
I'm talking about what pieces of international law are applicable to this situation.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Which, of course, I mean, internal laws in Israel would also be applicable here. But I'm not an expert on constitutional law of Israel or human rights in Israel, blah, blah, blah. So that would be applicable in its own right as well. But that's not what the entire world is concerned about. The entire world is concerned about international law and human rights.
Gotcha. So we've got applicable law for how do we figure this out? And then for the jurisdiction thing, how do we figure this out?
Right. So generally we talk about jurisdiction when we refer to what courts can decide whether a law has been broken or not. Right?
Okay.
So, for instance, I don't know about, in the US, for instance, you've got the federal circuit, right? So that's a set of courts that only sometimes have jurisdiction over some events and not others. And sometimes the state level has jurisdiction, etc. That's what I mean when I talk about jurisdiction.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
So here we have two big courts, the ICJ, International Court of Justice, and then there's the ICC, International Criminal Court. Those are not the only conceivable courts that could have jurisdiction here, but those are the main ones that you're going to hear about in past cases about Palestine, or in future cases, most likely in the case of the ICC.
And my understanding is the ICC litigates against individuals and the ICJ litigates against countries or between countries?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
The ICC deals with international criminal law, which means that only individuals have a mind and intent, and all of the rest.
Israel as a country can't kill somebody. It's an individual soldier that's charged with a crime or something like that, right? Yeah.
Well, both can be responsible, but they are responsible in different senses. That's, sure. I mean, it's here's where it will begin to be even more confusing, because international law is very confusing, very messy.
Okay.
So, for the same event, let's say a killing or torture, Israel can be held responsible as a state. We call that international responsibility.
Okay.
Right. So, as a state that had the duty to either oversee or prevent or punish this person and didn't. Right. And then there's the individual crime of this person. Right. The thing is, under international law, very, very, very few crimes are actually subject to international law. International law generally does not deal with crimes. This is a very, very slight exception. There are 4 or 5, perhaps. Yeah, nothing else than that.
Can you expand on that when you say international? When you say international law, there aren't very many crimes. You're talking about the ICC, then, right? What do you mean when you say that? There's like.
Yeah. So the Rome Statute of the ICC, that's a very recent thing. It was created in 1998. It was a compilation of previously existing international crimes. So those are genocide, crimes against humanity, the crime of aggression, and war crimes. Those are the big 4. And then other people are arguing for the creation or consolidation of new ones, but those are the big 4. Right.
Okay, so hold on. This is important. Okay. So the ICC recognizes essentially what? So 4 major categories of crimes, or 4 essentially 4 crimes, and those 4 crimes are genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. When we say genocide, we're talking about like the intentional destruction of a group of people. I mean, kind of vague or broad here. if you want to correct this, when you say crimes against humanity, would this include what, like poisoning somebody's water supply or?
No. Crimes against humanity is defined in very, very concrete terms, and it includes a broad range of conducts. The thing is, one or more than one of these conducts. You can go to the Rome Statute, because it's like a list of 12 or 13. They have to be committed as a part of a systematic or widespread attack against the civilian population. So it's one of them, but there's this additional requirement that in the context that this happens, a lot of other stuff has to be going on. It has to be either systematic, which would suggest some kind of central planning, or widespread. So as in Rwanda situation, where people are just killing everyone on the street, even if there's no central command. This is the thing we're talking about when we talk about crimes against humanity.
As a real quick thing for this crimes against humanity, I see that it says committed on behalf of a de facto authority. Does this mean that if Israel were to deprive all of its citizens of rights, that wouldn't be a war crime? But if Israel were to deprive, say, people in the West Bank of rights, you could argue that that's like a crime against humanity because that's a de facto authority? Does this not apply to de jure authority?
No.
Or yeah, explain that.
So what this means is, so if we took restricted definition of to whom this is applicable to, and we said only people in the service of states, well then, for instance, in the Republika Srpska, in the former Yugoslavia, in the context of the Yugoslav wars, then people working for or obeying the commands of the Republika Srpska, which was a de facto authority but was not a state, then you could not pass judgment onto them, right? But this is not to be something different than states. This is to take states plus other things that act like states but are not states, like, for instance, a rebel group or an unrecognized state, or the Palestine Authority as well. This would apply to the Gazan government. So whoever acts as an authority de facto, even if it's not a state.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so this would be crimes against humanity. War crimes, broadly speaking, what is this?
Well, the Rome Statute essentially makes a reference to the Geneva Convention. So whatever is in the Geneva Conventions, which is a very long list of things that you can do to prisoners of war, wounded soldiers, sailors who are, adrift at sea, and then civilian population in the context of armed conflict, right? So all of those people, there are 4 Geneva Conventions, right? One for each of the collectives I've mentioned.
Of course,
right?
yes,
So
I know that.
one for prisoners, one, etc. So in all of those 4 Geneva Conventions and 2 additional protocols, well, there are 3 of them, but whatever.
Okay.
In all of that, war crimes are mentioned. Like if you torture a prisoner, that would be a war crime. So essentially the Rome Statute defines war crimes with reference to the Geneva Conventions. Okay,
gotcha. And then for the final one, crimes of aggression, what's that?
Yeah, it's it should be singular. It's a crime of aggression means this is the stranger one. Essentially, it means when you are in a position of commanding the state, right? So even if you're the chief of staff of the army or president, whoever is in charge, and you decide to invade the neighboring country, right? But this is special because it is only applicable to people who are in a position of ultimate command, right? Whereas all of the other crimes that I've mentioned, it must happen in a certain context, right? Systematic, widespread, concerted, organized, blah, blah, blah. But you can be a mere soldier. Whereas the crime of aggression is designed to, put ministers of foreign affairs, presidents, prime ministers in jail. That's
gotcha.
So the kind of person that can be convicted of that is very specific.
Okay. I understand this. So this is what the ICC litigates. What is the ICC? Who are they? Who composes it? What if I'm not a signatory to it? Can you explain this?
Right. So the ICC was created because it was the system that we had before was very unsatisfactory. The notion of international crimes was created, well, actually in World War I, but more, widespread in the Nuremberg trials, etc. All about that. But then there was no consensus to create a permanent tribunal to pass judgment for these kinds of crimes. So when the 90s came along, there was this big a small moment in which there was big optimism. The Soviet Union fell, and it wasn't a constant veto war in the Security Council, etc. And then both big events happened, which was the Rwandan genocide and the Yugoslav wars. So there was no court before that, so they had to create special courts: the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia and the other one for Rwanda. This was very unsatisfactory. So in '98 they said, okay, let's create a permanent one that is not created ad hoc for a conflict, but it's created for in general, right?
Okay.
So who creates that? It was created in the auspices of UN, but as all international treaties ever, parties are states. How many states? I don't have the list now, but I think it's like around 100. So a little more than a half of states in the world.
Okay. Notably, I believe the United
Yes.
States is not part of this
Oh,
right
no.
now. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh no. Okay.
One of the big problems is that the countries that would be, let's say, susceptible of having
held
their,
accountable, right? Because I see like Russia has withdrawn
Yes.
their signature, the United
Yep.
States
Yep.
has, and
Yep.
Israel has. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got countries
And
like China
sometimes-
have never signed, Saudi Arabia has never signed, India has never
Exactly.
signed. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
That's a big problem for the credibility of the court, but also it is sometimes called the Africa Court, because except one, I believe, of all of the cases that have ever been tried in the ICC, all of them have been African military officers or African politicians.
Gotcha.
Why?
So,
Well, yeah.
yeah. What is so the ICC goes after individuals. What's the process by which, well, actually, firstly, who or where is the ICC? I want to go to the building and file a complaint. Where do I go?
Yeah. It's the, I don't remember the name of the building, but it's in The Hague in the Netherlands. So
Okay, so not a real place. Okay, I got you.
It's confusing because people say, well, we're gonna litigate this in The Hague, but The Hague is home for both the ICC and the ICJ, so that does not help anyone.
Okay. Okay, so we've got, oh my God, I fucked up the formatting on this. No, I didn't. Okay. Okay, what is the process firstly, who runs the ICC?
Well, it's made out of, I don't know how many judges, 12? I don't know. They're appointed by essentially the parties. I don't know. I'm not that, well, a disclaimer that I should have made at first. My sub-area of specialty is not international criminal law, so
Okay.
I'm not adept at that. You can look that up in Wikipedia, but essentially they choose a panel of judges for a set number of years, and then there's a prosecutor who is a very important person there. There are, I believe, two routes for which a process can be begun. Well, first there's an investigation, and then out of this investigation, names emerge out of possible suspects.
Sure. Can you tell me what is the process by which you bring charges in the ICC? Like somebody says like there's a war criminal in, Kony is a war criminal or Netanyahu is a war criminal. What is the process by which you bring charges, to the International Criminal Court?
Yeah, essentially it's oftentimes, most likely it's a prosecutor, but also member states can refer a case and a name to the ICC. The court itself, so the judges themselves, are the ones who, let's say, approve of the processing of this person. So
Gotcha.
the prosecutor and states may propose something, but the court has to say there is enough here to start a procedure against someone.
Okay. And can a member state bring charges that they want the ICC to consider? The answer to this must be yes. Against members or people in non-member states? I feel like the answer is yes, because
yes
I remember
and no.
reading the ICC make a ruling on the flotilla incident and whether or not Israeli IDF soldiers had committed war crimes. And I don't believe Israel was a signatory to the ICC at the time. But I could be wrong on that.
No, it's not. But there are. So first we have to talk about jurisdiction, which means what are the cases in which the ICC has jurisdiction? Well, first it's the 4 crimes that we've mentioned. Second is territorial. So the ICC has jurisdiction on the territory of all of the signatory parties.
Okay.
That would include Palestine. That is a very controversial thing that happened in 2014, I believe. That's the judgment, one of the 2 judgments that I was referring to. It was very polemic because Palestine is not even considered to be a state by many. So the fact that they were considered enough of a state to be signatories to the Rome Statute and therefore a party to the ICC, and therefore for the ICC to have jurisdiction. That's a very contentious process that that one I looked up. And second is nationals of signatory parties. So
gotcha. So I could be in a country like Libya or something, and somebody could do something to me, and I could bring a case there if I'm from like Canada, and I could say something because I'm a national of a country that's a signatory to the ICC. Even if somebody did it to me in a country that is not a signatory, I could theoretically go to the ICC.
No, but it's not you as a victim, but you as a perpetrator. So if you are a Canadian in Libya, it could be applicable to you because of your nationality.
Gotcha.
But if you're a Libyan in Libya, no. Right.
If I'm a Canadian national in Libya, somebody else could theoretically present war charges or war crime charges to the ICC about me, even though Libya is not a signatory or whatever, right?
Exactly, because you're a Canadian national and Canada is a signatory. Again, I'm looking at the same Wikipedia color-coded map that you're looking at, so that's the extent of my knowledge of the... I know Europe, Africa, and Latin America are the big areas in which most states are signatories.
Okay. Okay. ICC. Okay, I understand this. So, it's really dog shit. You understand this, right? International law is very unsatisfying and very dog shit. It's very nice that in the United States I can appeal to a final court. I know who has jurisdiction over everything. So on the ICC, let's say the ICC makes a bunch of rulings about Israeli soldiers and say they've committed 5 billion war crimes, okay? We ran through everything. They've committed 5 billion war crimes, and Israel's not a signatory to the ICC. What does it mean to say that? The International Criminal Courts have ruled this is illegal, therefore there's some moral authority. Is there any conviction or any, like, what can they do anything? Like, what is the enforcement mechanism or arm?
So all of the states that are... So first... caveat is I agree, it's a very frustrating process. The reason it is because we don't have a world government, we don't have a world police, we don't have the institutions that states have in order to make the law and the institutions that are supposed to enforce the law to be as neat and ordered. Like, so if I commit a crime here in Spain, I know what is the applicable law, I know what is the judge that has jurisdiction. When we have a sentence, we know what prison I'm going to. Everything is very neat. International law is not like that because we don't. It's kind of a horizontal system made by. Think as if it was the jungle, and there are 200 individuals, and they do not agree to form a state with centralized authority, but they agree to make agreements. Which, again, what is the force of those agreements? It's depends on the context, depends on the level of institutions that states agree to create in order for those agreements to be supervised and enforced, blah, 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 blah. That was a caveat. So responding to your question, all of the signatories of the Rome Statute have committed themselves to, if there is an arrest warrant for someone before the ICC, to arrest that person. So if an Israeli soldier had an international arrest warrant issued by the ICC against them, if they traveled outside of Israel into one of the nations that are parties to the ICC, one of those nations would arrest this person. The instances in which they wouldn't are very slim, have to do with diplomatic immunity and stuff, which is a very big can of worms in itself.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's one powerful thing. If the ICC has declared somebody's committed crimes, and there's been like, can they? I don't know what the.
Well, not committed, but there is an arrest warrant for them while the process is ongoing. So there was. You don't need any definite determination, any final judgment for an arrest warrant.
So it can be like in the U.S. we've got things called bench warrants or summons where you have got to show up to court to do your thing, but you're not necessarily guilty of anything.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Or for instance, there was a guy who was a colonel in Croatia who spent, I believe, 5 or 7 years in preventive custody in jail while the process was ongoing. So it's not even an arrest warrant for you to appear in court. It's an arrest warrant for you to spend years in jail while you wait for the judgment to happen, if the court deems that you're a flight risk or whatever.
Gotcha. So Putin here, because I'm looking up, because I remember this, but I didn't know anything about international law, and I still don't. So Putin has an arrest warrant from the ICC relating to, I think, Ukraine stuff. Does this mean that Putin theoretically can't travel to any country that is a signatory to the ICC because they would have an obligation to arrest him? Or
yeah, It's kind of a legal problem. It's an open question that has not been tested ever. There was a previous case in which the president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, there was an arrest warrant against him, and he was to travel to South Africa, I believe. I think he eventually canceled the trip, so this conflict didn't happen. But South Africa said, I have two conflicting obligations. One is a very ancient, one of the pillars of international law, which is the diplomatic immunities, the immunity of foreign heads of state to be arrested, etc., because of very good reasons and ancient reasons. And then second, I have the ICC here telling me diplomatic immunity is not applicable to this guy, and you have to arrest him. So South Africa said, if you make me, I will leave the ICC. I will leave the Rome Statute because I believe my obligations toward that are more important than the ICC. So we never got to that point because I think Omar al-Bashir...
Wait. My obligations to what are more important than the ICC?
Toward the norms in international law.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I thought you said to Rome Statute versus the ICC, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah, okay, yeah. That makes sense. Okay. Oof. So, okay, I understand. Gotcha.
In the case of Putin, it would essentially depend on this state. There would be either an arrest or not an arrest, and then there would be a big legal battle. Well, aside from all of the military and economic and political implications, legally there would be a battle as to whether the arrest was legal, because Putin has an ex cathedra, we call that, right to diplomatic immunity. Ex cathedra means because of the of his office, the office that he's carrying, which is head of state.
President,
all head of states.
Okay.
All heads of government, all ministers of foreign affairs, and all ambassadors have that.
Can I ask you a question? I'm so sorry. I'm pulling back for a slightly more macro question. Why would any country on the planet submit themselves to the authority of the International Criminal Court if the United States doesn't do so? And a lot of people would consider, just due to the sheer size and involvement in so many other countries, the U.S. to be arguably one of the largest violators potentially of international law, depending on the time period we're talking about, depending on what we're talking about. Like, why, if U.S. citizens don't have to face international criminal courts for Abu Ghraib, why the fuck should people in Russia have to stand for stuff related to Mariupol, right? Why would any country around the world submit themselves to that authority? I haven't guessed, but you can tell me. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say to groups of reasons. The first one is more kind of idealistic or ideological, which is so certain states have a political commitment to that for their history, for the ideology of their governments, because just there are some countries that are their legal tradition, their political tradition is way more, let's say, optimistic about international law and almost performative power of international law, that if we believe enough in this, it will end up being a worldwide consensus that will end up having effect, even if right now it's kind of half-baked and stuff, right? You can apply that to, so for instance, the many conventions relating to climate change, right? So for instance, the Montreal Convention against the chlorofluorocarbonates, it began as kind of in my country we say a toast to the sun, so something that was very far-fetched, and it ended up being universal, and we effectively closed the ozone layer, the hole in the ozone layer, right? So in some instances, there are countries that always begin this process and are more optimistic and hope that others will follow, etc. So that's one group of answers. The second one, in the more kind of egotistical side, would be, well, there's a territorial jurisdiction thing, right? So if, let's say, U.S. soldiers did something in whatever, Kenya, whatever. Let me look at the map.
Whatever African country. Yeah, Kenya, Uganda. Yeah, one of those. Yeah, I understand. It's all right. You're a European. I'm an American. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so the Kenyan authorities caught that person. They could refer him to the ICC because the events happened in Kenyan soil. Again, there would be way more important concerns for the Kenyan government than the legal ones in that case, which is, the US with all of their economic, diplomatic, military might knocking on their door and saying, hey, knock it off, don't take this guy, let's make a backroom arrangement or whatever. But legally, they could do that. That would be the more self-interested reason, probably.
Gotcha,
But
okay.
I would say the first group of reasons would be more important than the second. Ironically, even if I believe you have a bit of a cynical or more cynical approach, at least than me, to international relations or international law. But states don't act that way. In many instances, like you can see that in the
More cynical.
birth of
I don't think I'm cynical, or maybe you consider this cynical. My approach, generally when I read about states, and I don't think I've seen anything that contradicts this, at least for democracies and stuff, but even for like authoritarian rules and whatnot, like international communities and international opinion is pretty important. And it kind of, unless you're like some itty bitty, like fucking genocidal crazy person, like even Putin to some extent wants to maintain decent standing with other countries or wants to maintain some decent standing with international communities and everything.
For sure.
So I think that, I do think that states will mold their foreign policy around these opinions, depending on how reliant they are for other states. Yeah.
Right. Great. We're on the same page here. There's a big, it's called in academic circles, the name and shame process, right? So if there's a state that is an international pariah, they refuse to enter into, many international treaties that are almost universal, etc. The US is one of those in many instances.
Yeah.
Well, they lose first a bunch of their soft power when the U.S. goes before the international community, at least pretending to, or either pretending to, or sincerely advocating for a set of human rights or for an intolerable situation that is going on in a foreign country. A big part of their soft power or legitimacy, credibility, whatever you want to call it, it's gone. In part because of, I don't know. I can give you a bunch of instances. In the 80s, there was a very important, very transcendental judgment between Nicaragua and the U.S. And the court essentially blamed the U.S. for what they did, supporting the Contras and everything else, illegally using force, illegally interfering in domestic affairs of Nicaragua, etc. And the U.S., I don't remember who was the president back then. It was 1985, 1984. Essentially, they stormed out of the court and stopped recognizing the jurisdiction of the court and essentially said, well, I lost the game of chess. I'm going to throw the table because I lost. And now I'm not recognizing the world court, which the U.S. created.
Yeah.
Eleanor Roosevelt, it was part of an invention of the U.S. after World War II. And then since they lost a big case, they stormed out. So
which case was this, real quick?
Armed activities in Nicaragua, I think. Military and paramilitary activities against Nicaragua. That was the name of the case in the ICJ in the 1984, I believe.
Gotcha. Was this relating to our? I might be totally off. I'm sorry. I don't know fuck all about Central Southern. Was this related to like the Contras and everything?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
And then another example would be the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is almost universal, and it's the biggest piece of one of the biggest pieces of legislation governing one of the biggest issues in international law, which is the law of the sea, right? So navigation, commercial exploitation, fishing, everything you can think about regarding the sea. The U.S. is not in there, despite intervening in the negotiations. I mean, it's not all a blame of the federal government, because you've got this rule that the Senate has to approve by 2/3 any international treaty, and it's super hard. They don't even agree on the time of day, right?
You're talking for the U.S. courts, right?
No, for the U.S. to ratify an international treaty.
I'm sorry, not U.S. courts. I mean, you're talking about the U.S. Our legislative body, right?
Yes, exactly.
About the Senate. Yeah, okay, just making sure you weren't talking about another person. Yeah, I understand.
Yes, no. The U.S. Senate has to ratify every single international treaty with a 2/3 majority, I believe.
Yeah.
That's a big part of why the U.S., despite being arguably the leader of the free world and the biggest financier of the WTO and the UN and all of these big institutions, and leader of let's go and intervene in Afghanistan for world peace and in Iraq, etc., they're not parties to most of the treaties that the world has mostly agreed on.
Yeah. Okay, so this might be a slightly cynical view, but when I said earlier, I asked you, why do all of these other countries sign up for it if the U.S. doesn't? My more cynical view there actually is related to, like unions, right? It feels, it feels a little bit like a union. If you're like a multi-million-dollar talent and you're at the top of your industry, you actually don't want a union. A union will fuck you. You want to make as much money as you can and fuck everybody else because you're at the fucking top. The unions are there for the little guys that need the collective bargaining power. I feel like, I wonder if you're like a, not to be mean or U.S. exceptionalist, but like we're the fucking United States of America. I don't need international courts to protect anything related to my country. We have the first, second, third, and I think fourth largest air forces in the world just in the United States alone. So we can enforce and handle all of our stuff. If you're a smaller country though, or if you're a country around the world that doesn't have like massive military, all this present, then you joining with other countries to be able to kind of submit a little bit of your autonomy to an international court gives you protection from other bad actors because you might need those larger bodies where other countries are coming together to decide things, to litigate things or whatever. And that protection that you're afforded is worth giving up a little bit about autonomy because you can't enforce everything on your own because you don't have the same privileges, I guess, that the United States or US allies or Russia or China might have. Yeah.
I actually disagree on you a bit, and here we're delving into U.S. history rather than international law. But I believe in different, let's say, vision of American exceptionalism.
Okay.
I think the U.S. In the very crucial moment, the second half of the 19th century and first half of the 20th, that all of the other major powers in the world were, by right of conquest and exerting imperialism into the fuller extent of. What they could achieve with their military, etc. The U.S. from their beginning, I believe, because of the very unique way in which your framers designed the Constitution and then the political culture around all of the U.S. parties, etc., were very, very careful to not do to others what they perceived the UK did to them, right? So, for instance, there are exceptions, of course. Like, for instance, Puerto Rico or Hawaii. There are examples in which the US behaved like other major powers. But for the rest, in that crucial period of history and afterwards, there was a very big emphasis on why are we doing this abroad? Why is this a concern of ours? And if there's a concern of ours for our safety or whatever, let's be very careful to not mix our own self-interested concerns with actually invading or colonizing others.
Okay. Oh yes. Okay. Yeah. Get me on this American exceptional strategy. I super disagree, but not without much knowledge. So I want you to argue against this. I'm curious. Okay.
Yeah. Because let me give you an example.
Yeah.
In the early 20th century, so from 1900 to 1920, the biggest debate in the U.S. was whether to invade and annex Cuba. And there was a huge debate that wouldn't have happened in any other major power at the time.
Wait, in what year was this?
I think it was during right before and right after Theodore Roosevelt's presidency.
Okay, go ahead.
So there was a part of the U.S. establishment that was very dead set against annexing Cuba. And then I think Roosevelt was one of the more pro-imperialist, quote unquote, in the U.S. And eventually the ones that prevailed were the ones that were against annexing Cuba. And again, there are different explanations for this. I'm not going to say it's all ideological about the role of the U.S. in international relations and belief in international law or anti-imperialism, but there were also economic concerns about southern planters, blah, 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 blah. But there was a big ideological component here. Like, we were a country created using higher ideals. We were oppressed by a foreign nation. We didn't like that. Why should we do that to others? What happens when the Cubans rebel against us, etc., etc., etc. So here, I don't think that would have happened in France or the UK at all.
You don't think other countries in Europe, there must be some examples of them considering the annexation or conquering of some territory and they decided not to for a variety of reasons, no?
At the time, the only reasons that I believe would have been considered by the French government or UK government would be practical reasons, economic reasons. Otherwise, like, why not? We have a big empire. Let's make it bigger.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't believe. Yeah.
Okay. Here, this is my take on this. Okay, and again, damn, you're giving me such good America vibes. Okay, so. My question.
Listen, I grew up in a staunchly anti-NATO, anti-American family, and I believe I'm.
I thought you said you were in Spain, not France.
I'm from a region in Spain where the anti-American sentiment is especially vibrant. Let's say.
Gross. Okay.
Yeah.
okay, my take on it, or my feeling, okay, this is loosely historically based because I don't know fuck all about US history, okay, but I feel like one of the reasons why, because I actually asked this question I think a month ago, I was like, why doesn't the US have colonies, right? It seems like every loser, no offense, European nation, they all had fucking colonies everywhere, sometimes bigger than their own countries. Why did they all get colonies and the United States didn't go and colonize everybody? That's bullshit. And the feeling that I kind of had on this was that the United States is just so unique in terms of our access to huge swaths of geography that we didn't need to. That while in Europe, you guys have been fighting for over 2,000 years, I don't even know, 3,000, 4,000, I don't know how many thousands of years. You guys in Europe have all been fighting over the same hunk of land. When the United States came to the New World, we were like, holy shit, we've got all this shit that we can just move west and take. And we've got resources and we can kill all these Indians that are diseases and we don't even know about it. And it's just like boom, 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 boom. That when you look at like the United States' ability to manifest destiny, to expand from sea to shining sea and take all that land, and then you combine that with, if you look at like, for instance, what we did in terms of slavery, okay, I think the United States my feeling is, we're pretty uniquely horrible when it came to chattel slavery compared to other countries in the world. So we had the propensity to do kind of bad shit. It feels like when you ask the question, like, why didn't the US take colonies? I think it's because the United States had like gifted to it. Like it was literally like spawning a new map when the rest of the world had been fighting forever and we just got to take so much shit that we didn't have to. Like if it would have just been that sliver of 13 colonies and that was it, and that was all that existed of North America, I feel like, would we not have tried to colonize stuff? Yeah, maybe you disagree, yeah.
No, I believe that's part of it, but there's another part of it, which is at the time of the foundation of the US, the thinking of, I believe from what I've read, in some Federalist papers and some legal theory in that period, the big ideological fight they had was they didn't have a principled position against empire. They had a principled opposition towards the commercial policies of empire. When I say empire, I mean the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, etc. What that means is, especially the Spanish Empire had a policy of Spanish colonies are only allowed to trade with the metropolis. They're not allowed to trade with the US. They're not allowed to trade with the UK, etc. Right? So for the US at the beginning, their big ideological fight was to open or free, let's say, all of those economies for international trade in Latin America and Central America specifically. And that's where the Monroe Doctrine came. Once those states became independent, mostly out of the Spanish Empire, they were then vulnerable to another European power coming there and reestablishing the same system where they could only trade with the metropolis. International trade was essentially barred.
Okay.
So the Monroe Doctrine means if you come to our quote unquote backyard, we are appointing ourselves protectors of all of the Americas, and all of the Americas are going to have a special economic relationship with us, etc. And we don't want them to be your own backyard in which only you can trade. So I think the US in the earlier part of its history was content with free trade. That was a big one. And then there were a couple of exceptions. Like, for instance, Liberia, you can argue it was quote unquote a US colony, but it was established for the purpose of partial slave emancipation. Then you have the case of Hawaii. You've got the case of Puerto Rico. So there are exceptions to this. But
interesting. Okay.
If you compare the military might of the U.S., like what they could have achieved if they set their mind to, like it's not even close.
It's true. I like you. Thank you. Yeah. Another reason I love my country. Okay, that's awesome. I have a hard time sometimes with the early stuff for the United States because like I truly do believe that like all of their the Federalist Papers and then the early writings of the founding fathers and like the unique moment in history they were at and the intelligentsia of like that group of people and everything, that it was a cool project to create a nation with our constitution, ensuring and enshrining the rights it did, blah, 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 blah. But sometimes it's hard when I look at that and I'm like, God, all of that was so cool and it was written so well and it ensures with so many rights, except for like black people and women. So sometimes it's a little bit hard, but I guess like maybe at that point in time nobody in history did and they weren't people yet. But yeah. Okay.
I mean, the only other two emancipatory movements that were happening at the time were the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution.
Okay.
The French Revolution, only the most crazy ass Jacobins thought of going further than the Americans in the sense of including women partially and emancipating the slaves. And those people were fucking crazy. everything else, right? So they were way ahead of the 98% of the ideological position of their own countrymen. So it was destined to fail because it was so unpopular even at the time. And the Haitian Revolution ended with a genocide. They genocided the whites. Okay. So I think the US, stopped right where I'm not justifying all the things that you've mentioned, of course, but in historical terms, at the time, it was the most progressive and stable, as has been shown, system that could have probably have been designed, etc.
Gotcha. Okay, sorry.
Again, I said my region and my parents are anti-American. I'm not. I'm big believer.
Okay. All right. So coming off of all of this, I'm sorry, going back. Okay. So we talked about the ICC, okay? ICC is the International Criminal Court in, I'm sorry, in Hague? How the fuck do you pronounce this place?
The Hague. The Hague.
Can you tell me how an American would pronounce this? Hague?
The Hague.
Yes. No, I don't know what I don't have that sound in my American tongue.
Hagua.
Okay, Hague. Okay. Is in the Netherlands.
I think the Dutch call it Den Haag.
Okay, literally nobody cares about the Dutch. Okay, all right.
Well, it's in the Netherlands, so...
Yeah, that doesn't change what I said. Okay, so, we've got, the ICC exists. The ICC is a totally separate body that exists, right? It's not part of the UN or anything like that, right?
No.
And then the ICC, the crimes that it recognizes are basically four categories of crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, crimes of aggression. People or nationals who are signatories to the Rome Statute of the ICC are capable of bringing cases here. And then, sorry, what were you going to say? Go ahead.
A thing that you might be interested in is that one of the elements or possible crimes inside of crimes against humanity is apartheid. Because you asked me about apartheid, so it's in there. It's inside of crimes against humanity.
Apartheid is in there?
Yeah.
Against crimes against humanity. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay. Oh, that would make sense, yes, because it's a widespread or criminal activity that is executed by a de facto authority, usually on behalf of a state that violate human rights. Apartheid would be under that. Okay, interesting.
Exactly,
okay. Yeah. Okay, that's the ICC. Okay. Talk to me about the ICJ. Is this a part of the UN, I think?
Yes. It's an organ of the UN. It's the UN Charter calls it the principal judicial organ of the United Nations.
The principal judicial organ of the United Nations, okay.
Yes. So if you go to the UN Charter, there's an annex, and the annex is the statute of the court. And when you subscribe to the UN, you automatically also, when I say subscribe, I mean ratify, become a member of the UN, you also automatically become a member of the statute of the court. Okay. Again, this is separate from whether the court has jurisdiction, because it's easy to confuse the two. Every single state in the world that is a member of the United Nations is also a member of the court, but this doesn't mean the court automatically has jurisdiction to be able to decide a case.
Okay. All right. Let's do. Okay. So if you're part of the UN, you are a member also of the ICJ.
Yes.
Right? Okay. The ICJ litigates issues between nations, not individuals, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, okay. Jurisdiction. Talk to me about this.
Wow. Okay. This is where it's going to get crazy, okay? I'm going to try and make it as simple as I can, but it's a very technical subject. There are three what are called heads of jurisdiction, which means ways in which the court can establish I do have jurisdiction for this case and among these parties, right?
Okay.
So far, so good? Okay. So the first head of jurisdiction, so the first way in which the court can have jurisdiction is a special agreement. So essentially two states or more than two states go before the court and sign a special agreement. That's why it's called special agreement, saying we give jurisdiction to the court for this case, and they have to delimit what is this case. So what are the legal issues? What is the timeline? What is the territory? So they have to delimit very carefully the boundaries of the issue that the court has to decide. And then the court has
can I
Yep.
I'm going to ask you I understand you might have answers to these. Is it possible that you could make an agreement that the court could later say was unjustifiable or something? Do you understand what I'm saying?
An agreement? You mean like an international treaty?
Like in the United States, I could theoretically go to a party. We could have a lawyer, and we could have everybody sign off where I say, I'm going to sign away my life into sexual servitude for the rest of my life to this other person. Yeah. And even though you sign that, later on, a court might look at that. And even though you guys agreed to it and you had a lawyer present, you could go to a court later and the court would say, sorry, but no, this agreement, this is not okay. You were never allowed to sign it. Yeah. Can you make it an agreement or something in front of the ICJ, and then later on the ICJ comes back and says, sorry, actually, that agreement was not okay.
Oh. Yeah. Wait, first a distinction. When I was referring to for a special agreement here, it's only for the purpose of the court saying, I have jurisdiction to adjudicate. What you're saying is in general.
Never mind. Okay, I'm sorry. This is only to agree to allow the court to have jurisdiction. We're on that part. I'm sorry. Exactly. I skipped ahead way far. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I understand. Okay.
But let's finish this parenthesis. I'm going to answer your question about.
Sure.
There are three, I believe, situations in which the agreement could be null and void. First one is, if the agreement is concluded via coercion of whoever signs, or you either sign this or I'm going to declare war, or via corruption of this person. I'm bribing the Minister of Foreign Affairs to sign this, whatever. This would be a cause for nullity.
Okay.
Second would be there is something called imperative law or perentory law, which means there are few norms in international law that anything else that contradicts those is automatically null and void, including any agreement among nations, including any other norm, anything. That's called imperative law. Again, a very hard concept to define, etc., but you get the gist. Mm-hmm. And then, the third, it's not a cause for nullity of an agreement, but let's say you and me sign an agreement stipulating a series of conditions. But then, simultaneously, you have agreements with whoever, your wife, Lycan, etc., saying something that is incompatible. Well, our agreement does not get you off the hook for your agreement with others.
Okay.
Right. So our agreement would probably still be formally valid.
Okay.
But you also have other engagements towards others. Mm-hmm. So those are the limits.
Can I ask a general question? If any two member states of the United Nations, signs a treaty with each other, do they always bring this treaty before the ICJ, or do they just sign bilateral treaties generally and say, fuck the ICJ? What is the general modus operandi there for like the United States or for other countries, we'd say?
The answer is, remember that I said there are three heads of jurisdiction? I would say the ICJ can hear any issue of international law, of any area of the law, be it in the context of the UN or bilateral, multilateral, any. Okay. The only restriction is the ICJ has to have jurisdiction.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. And we were establishing so one is with a special agreement, and then you're going to give me two others, I think. Okay.
Yes. Second one is a compromissory clause, which means there is a multilateral treaty. So, for instance, the ICCPR, the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights. There's a clause there, or the Genocide Convention, right? There's a clause there, Article 9, that says any controversy regarding the interpretation or application of this convention, the parties can bring to the ICJ, right? So there's a separate treaty in which the parties agree that if in the future there is a disagreement or there's a violation of this treaty, the parties can go to the ICJ.
Okay, and this is if the parties can bring something to the ICJ if there is a violation of of things related to
of a treaty that contains this compromissory clause. The compromissory clause.
Oh, okay. So it's basically an arbitration agreement, a mediation agreement. Like, hey, listen, here's a treaty. If this shit fucks up, though, we both agree that we're going to go to the ICJ to figure out what's going on, essentially.
Yes, but don't call it arbitration, because arbitration is very different. Because in an arbitration, you can choose who the arbiter is, what's the procedure going to look like, etc.
Whereas you're choosing the arbitrator. Yeah, the arbitrator is the ICJ. But okay, I understand what you're saying. Like, okay.
In an informal sense, yes. In a formal sense, an arbiter gives the parties way more freedom to choose what the process is going to look like, etc. Whereas the ICJ has their rules, and once the court has jurisdiction, you don't have a say in which how the procedure is going to be.
Yeah, what you're saying actually makes sense. Now that I'm remembering contracts, it's not actually arbitration clauses, or the arbitration clause is usually waiving your right to arbitration and then submitting yourself to a predetermined mediator or something like that, I think. So that makes sense, even for the contracts that I've seen. So
yeah.
Okay.
This is a clause giving jurisdiction to a court that functions as a regular court in the US. It's not at all as an arbiter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's the second.
Okay, yep. And then third way.
And then the third is what it's called the optional clause declaration. So in the ICJ statute, if you remember, it's an annex to the UN Charter. There's an article there, Article 38, that says states can, if they want, make a unilateral declaration saying, hey, from now on into the future, I will be allowing anyone to submit a case against me before the ICJ for any reason, right? So states kind of unilaterally say, I'm in. Again, there are caveats to this. First caveat is this is subject to reciprocity. So for instance, the US has not made one of those declarations.
Gotcha.
Spain has. So the US could not sue Spain before the ICJ because the US has
wants
not
to submit
made
itself to that court's jurisdiction, basically, right? Yeah.
Well, the US can submit itself to the court's jurisdiction via the first two methods, but not via this third method.
Okay, gotcha.
Optional clause declaration. And then there's a second caveat, which means the states that make this unilateral declaration can make reservations, so exceptions to this. So, for instance, Spain could say, I will give the ICJ jurisdiction from now on, except in cases that concern the law of the sea. Well, there you have an exception in which the court would not have jurisdiction.
Okay.
There are, so for instance, the UK, this is a real example, in 2017, modified their own declaration in order to exclude issues relating to nuclear weapons or nuclear weapons testing. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay.
Right, so that's the jurisdiction of the ICJ. If one of those three paths you can establish, then the court begins its work. It does it's a pretty slow court to rule, and I don't know. I was gonna ramble on a bunch of details that maybe you're not interested in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's like a random question, I guess. In the United States and in every country, right? I guess it feels good to be able to say something is illegal. And when you say something is illegal, it carries with it, it generally carries a pretty strong moral condemnation with it, right? Because you're doing something that socially we've agreed is against the law, number one. But number two, in my opinion, even more importantly, maybe not to the average person, but I think to somebody that's more legally astute, the more important thing is a body that has jurisdiction and processes by which they evaluate the legality of everything you've done have determined that you are actually factually in the wrong in this particular thing. That you've been accused of committing a crime that we all agree is a crime, et cetera, right? This is, It feels like when it comes to the ICC and the ICJ, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, so somebody like me who is basically full-throated fucking Zionist dick suck at this point, it feels like that's where I'm at. If somebody were to come at me and be like, hey, well, this is illegal or this is wrong or blah, 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 theoretically, I could always just counter and say like, oh, well, guess what? Israel's not a signatory to that. The ICJ doesn't have jurisdiction. Show me which of the three ways is jurisdiction established. Oh, the ICC? Who cares? Israel's not a signatory to this. They're not nationals to any of the people that are party to this. What is if you're a big proponent, and I imagine this is your PhD and you study this, you want international law to mean something. How do you respond to that? Or what do you do when it feels like if you've got countries that just aren't part of these larger bodies, they haven't signed on to the Rome Statute, or they don't submit any of the things to the ICJ. Yeah, how do you feel about that? Yeah, sorry, speak broadly of that. Yeah, go.
Yeah, there are many points to this. One is whether there is a norm or not that is applicable to you. You mentioned, well, Israel is not a party to this or not a party to that. You're missing a key mechanism here, which is that there are three sources of international law. One is treaties, which is purely, it is a contract essentially. It's
Gotcha.
we don't call it a contract because it's not private law, it's public law among
Sure.
states. But it's essentially.
Wait. Okay, you should have told me this in the beginning, motherfucker. Okay, wait. Hold on. I should
Yeah,
write
'cause-
this down really quick at the beginning. Okay, 3 sources of international
I
law.
didn't want to begin a full introduction lecture because
Well,
it's
okay.
better if we do it this dialogically.
Okay, so we have 3 major sources of international law. Okay, the first is going to be treaties, and these are just
Yes.
agreements ratified between 2 or more countries, right?
Yes.
Using those countries' particular legislative bodies, correct?
Not necessarily, no. So ratification is for each country to decide, each state to decide whom is the competent authority to give that consent to be bound. That's ratification.
Okay.
And what internal processes. So, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, it's an absolute monarchy, so probably there's no legislative process for that. Whereas in most democratic nations, usually the head of state or head of government signs that pending the approval of some legislative body, and then when there's the approval of that legislative body, then they can ratify, and then the final consent is given. So it depends on each state.
Okay, sorry. So it could be an agreement where like 2 countries, Iran and Israel, are like, we're going to make an agreement to stop fucking with each other, and they decide the U.S. mediates it, and the U.S. is doing this, but like that treaty is still valid. Okay, so a treaty is an agreement ratified between 2 or more countries. That's one source of international law. Okay, give me number 2.
Yeah. Second is customary law, one of the hardest and most weird and abstract concepts for students to grasp.
Okay.
Customary law is essentially, so actually the common law systems comprise this source of law as well. That means a group of people across time engage in a practice that is not codified into law. There's no statute that says this is the case. But they engage in the same practice, and the practice of all of them is similar enough, and it's constant enough and homogeneous enough. And then there's a second element, which is they do this because they have the subjective belief that they're doing it because it's compulsory. So even though there's no formal statute that prescribes behavior, they do it, and there's the belief that this is compulsory, right? So it would be kind of a quote-unquote social norm that ends up being a legal norm.
How do you run into this? Because like, let's say I've got 10 Arab states that are all ran by like fucking jihadists or something. I don't believe that's the case anywhere right now, where you've got 10 states together to do it. But let's say that was the case. Their customary law is probably going to look a lot different than somebody else's, right? Yeah. Or for instance,
exactly.
let's say you've got the customary law of, in the past, Muslim states would have like dhimmi treatment for Jews or Christians, where they would pay like a separate jizya, a separate tax and everything. Wouldn't somebody could theoretically argue in the ICC that sort of customary law is actually like a crime against humanity or something, if they feel like their rights are being violated because of being treated like apartheid, second-class citizens or whatever? Yeah. Or actually, I'm sorry, fuck all that. I can say customary law. Yeah, in South Africa, right? Customary law, apartheid existed for how many decades?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So
how do you reconcile this? Yeah, go ahead.
I only mentioned custom being a source of law inside in the domestic law of a specific country, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, to make an analogy. But customary international law, that's what we're concerned with here, is a norm that emerges out of the behavior and practice and beliefs of all of the states in the world, or a vast majority of states in the world.
Okay.
So you would need way more than just Arab states or Muslim states. There are actually several requirements, like what should this practice look like.
Okay.
There's not a specific set number of states that have to engage in this practice or a specific amount of time, but we have examples. We have, again, case law that shows us, okay, this was done by X number of states across time, and then a court eventually reached the conclusion that yes, this is a norm, even though it's not codified into a treaty.
Okay. And then third source of international law.
General principles, but those are the easier.
Okay.
Yeah, the easier way to explain general principles is, in the beginning of the 20th century, we established the first ever international court, which was called the Permanent Court of International Justice in the League of Nations. And this court, at that time, there were very few treaties, and the notion of customary law was emerging, and everything was very messy. But those people who are pioneers of international law needed a lot of stuff that was not written down in order to decide cases. So what they did was essentially saying, well, there are certain common sense legal principles that they didn't say this part out loud, but essentially they emerged out of Roman law, and they are codified or even not codified, but used by judges all around the West.
Okay.
That are kind of common sense principles. For instance, double jeopardy. Again, we've now codified this into statute, but used to be a case that was kind of a common sense thing. Or how should I interpret this word? Should I interpret this sentence that is ambiguous in its verbiage in this way or in this other way? Or the non-intervention principle is kind of a logical conclusion of the fact that states are sovereign, right? You shouldn't interfere with the domestic affairs of states, blah, blah, blah. So all of those are kind of necessary things that judges have said, well, we need this for the system to work.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood the start of this section, but now I understand. When I was asking, when you were saying sources of international law, I thought you were going to tell me about like the different bodies, like the ICJ, the ICC, but you're telling me this is generally where these, like the Rome statute is drawing from these types of sources of like, how do they figure out what's right? I understand. Okay. So these are your three broad, okay. This makes way more sense. I understand. Okay.
It's a confusing notion because in a modern nation state, the source of law is whatever the legislature passes into a statute. And then in common law systems, there's a common law, which is more akin to the customs of the judicial systems and the legal traditions of the country.
Well, I understand what you're saying, though, because in like the U.S. Supreme Court, when Supreme Court justices write their briefs or their opinions about cases, they're engaged in actually from the few Supreme Court majority opinions and dissenting opinions I read, they're engaged in actually exactly this type of conversation, where they're looking historically and they're saying like, what are the agreements that have been made between states? How do people customarily act? What was the common law like in the past when these laws were written? These types of things. So I'm guessing that that's the type of back and forth conversation. Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, before we move on, there's a fourth that is not a formal source. So every single piece of handbook or the statute of the ICJ, you'll never find this fourth as a source, but everyone understands that it's almost informally as important as a source, which is case law by international courts and the writings of the most well-publicized publicists, or whatever. That's the exact sentence that's in the ICJ statute. So what this means is the court cannot create new law. The court is only supposed to interpret the law, instantiate abstract words into concrete cases, etc. But in practice, since international law is so messy and we don't know is this a custom, is this not a custom, what is the word in this treaty, is this treaty applicable, etc., courts have a way bigger role than regular courts in nation states when it comes to interpreting what the law is. What the law is in Spain or in the US, it's way clearer. Whereas in international law, it's way less clear, so the role of courts is super important. So for instance, if you see now we're arguing about Gaza and whether the proportionality of the attacks or the blockade, etc., you'll see perhaps there's a couple of treaties and then people will move on straight to this judgment by the ICJ, etc. That's because it's not a formal source, but they have a super big role in interpreting what the law is.
Okay.
I think that's out of John Locke's mouth.
Okay. Okay. All right. We've got these things. Okay. And then I know I'm skipping around a lot. And if this was a formal lecture, I'm sure you have like a whole process by which you do this more organizedly. But
no. Yeah. This works.
Do you, okay. When I'm thinking of like, this is illegal internationally, what are the bodies that I'm referring to internationally? Who are these things? We've got the ICC, the ICJ. Are there any other big, like, this might be a really retarded question, I'm sorry. When we talk about like the Geneva Convention, for instance, there's not like a court of the Geneva Convention, right? It's just the ICC and the incorporation of the Rome Statute and everything, right?
And the ICJ. The ICJ could also apply.
Okay.
But no.
Yeah. So who are big bodies of like these guys determine internationally if things are legal or illegal? Like what are the ones we refer to here besides the ICJ and the ICC? Are there any others?
There are others. The problem is we have few and they're fragmentary. So for instance, in the context of Europe, the European Court of Human Rights is super important. even outside of Europe, other courts cite the European Court of Human Rights because it's kind of the most, let's say, advanced. I'm not just saying this because I'm European, but the European Court of Human Rights can hear complaints by individuals against states. That's the only instance in which this happens internationally. There's the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and then there's the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. There's the quasi-judicial organ for the settlement of international investment disputes in the context of the WTO.
Somebody's bringing up the International Court of Justice, the ICUP, for the Pacific Community or whatever. Is this a big one? Somebody in chat wants to know why you didn't bring this up or something. I don't know if that's...
It exists, but some of those courts... So I think the African Union also has a relevant court, but they're not like the others, as in they can either hear very few cases.
Okay.
So for instance, states sometimes will have there will be a skeptic to set up a court in which they can be found guilty of something. So what they will do is to set up a very complex mechanism for which complaints would reach the court, and the court would have jurisdiction. Either that, or they will only give the court a, let's say, declaratory or advisory role. So it may be called a court, but it's not really a court. It's a body that, yeah.
Okay, so for instance, all this. Okay, just
the human rights
time. Yeah. Okay. So, no, I'm just fucking with you. But okay, so it seems at the end of the day, these international courts exist. There are different ways that you could maybe... It seems like basically at the end of the day, these courts exist, and if you want to submit your autonomy to them or have them rule on things, you can, as long as kind of all the parties involved agreed. But these courts exist as like... Have you ever done role play before?
Yeah.
Okay.
You mean sexual? No.
No, not sexual. But like I used to, because you had like text-based games and shit. You like RP.
D&D.
Sometimes you would like role play with people like DBZ shit. I've
done D&D. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's not fun when the other guy's like, okay, well, my character's invincible. My character, his neck has steel arm plates. He's like, okay. Basically, the international courts kind of role play as real courts, as long as everybody agrees to kind of like role play with it. But as soon as somebody's basically like, okay, well, I'm not signing on to this, or I don't agree with this, or I don't subject myself to this arbitration, or I'm not going to have them oversee a treaty, or any of these other clauses are going to be put in. Fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of a little bit toothless, I'm guessing. Yeah. Explain that or defend them. Yeah.
Yes and no. Like the first point would be the fact that there's not a judicial organ to adjudicate whether a norm has in fact been breached does not mean that international law is toothless. We have a very big, let's say, legal mechanism to make international law enforceable.
Okay.
Even though we don't have a world government, we don't have a world police, and there's kind of a horizontal legal system. So all of the flaws that come with that. Mm-hmm. We have what are called countermeasures.
Okay.
So essentially, since we don't have a centralized enforcement mechanism, some of them, like some courts, and we have the UN, blah blah, but it's not quite there. Countermeasures is a legal mechanism in which a state that has had their rights before international law breached by a third party can, with some requirements, stop complying with their obligations toward the offending party. So, for instance, let me put an example.
Okay.
Again, there are a lot of caveats to this, but let's say Spain and Italy have a treaty saying that Italian fishing vessels will be allowed to fish in Spanish territorial waters, whatever. I'm making it up. Mm-hmm. And then Spain says, well, fuck the Italian fishermen, get out of here. And Italy says, well, you're breaching the treaty. There's no jurisdiction for any court to adjudicate these, or even if there is, you're not complying with the judgment. Mm-hmm. What do we do? Well, you and me, Spain and Italy, have a parallel treaty which says that Spain will give us tanks or corvettes or whatever, and I will pay. Well, I will not pay. That's the whole mechanism of a countermeasure.
Gotcha. But then again, that just seems like it reinforces the idea I said, where it's like, this really comes down to the internal politics of an individual country, and then where they want to be on like the world stage, basically. So, for instance, if a country wants to be in good standing with the world courts because they need political opinion, right? Like if Ukraine had, like for instance, have you followed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline stuff?
Yeah.
Like so I'm hesitantly saying this because I don't know if this is 100% verified, but it seems to be the case right now that that was almost for sure done by, not ordered by Zelensky, but done by people very high up in Ukraine's military. That seems to be where like the consensus is like focused on. If that was the case, Ukraine's image is damaged such that support for them, financially, diplomatically, militarily, is going to fall off in the rest of the world. But that type of like process is not like we need an international court, we need to convene judges to figure this out. It's more just like people aren't going to like you and they're not going to support you kind of thing. And it feels like the international criminal courts, because one of the nice things about court in the United States or in a country is, I don't give a fuck if you like me or not. We're going to go to court and we're going to figure out we're going to figure out who is right or wrong, not de facto, de jure. We're going to figure out who's right or wrong in the eyes of the law. But for the international criminal courts, it feels more like we're kind of like another measure for you guys to kind of track who's being nice and who's being bad. And sometimes if somebody really wants to say you're being bad, then we'll show them in the international court, but they're kind of toothless, and it's really at the end of the day just about like your agreements. Kind of like how you brought up earlier, like, listen, if you're a signatory to the Rome Statute, if a war criminal shows up, you've got to arrest him. That's part of the agreement. But when Putin is flying around the world, people are like, I'm not going to arrest the fucking head of Russia when he comes to my country. You're fucking insane. I don't give a fuck what the Rome Statute says. That's never happening. So yeah, it feels like I'm giving these opinions, by the way, really strong. If you think I'm incorrect or something, I'm just like forming my broad opinion.
No.
So if you think, push back if you feel like I'm wrong on something. But that's what it feels like, yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. There's a big part of what you're saying that is. I'm not gonna pretend otherwise. But think of it this way. Imagine you have as I was saying, 100 people in the jungle. You don't agree to establish a political community with centralized coercive power, centralized institutions, etc. But you do agree to some agreements that you will engage to comply in good faith, and that you agree, in theory, that there will be some legitimacy in others levying some consequences onto you if you breach those agreements. Imagine that's all you have. Sure. I would say we've done pretty good considering that's where we're departing from.
Okay,
considering no one agrees to a world police, no one agrees to give more teeth to the UN, no one agrees to an international court that has universal jurisdiction no matter what, and that can enforce their judgments using force. That doesn't exist. The only kind of teeth we have, quote unquote, teeth as in the use of coercive force by the international community against the state for some breach of international law, is Article 42 of the UN Charter, which says, so the UN Charter, one of its premises is Article 2.4 is we are from now on banning the use of force in international relations with only two exceptions. One is self-defense, of course. Second one is Article 42 of the UN Charter, which says if there is the Security Council deems a situation to be a threat to international peace and security, and there is one state that is openly, endangering international peace and security, the UN Security Council can authorize other states to essentially invade that country. It doesn't say that, but use military force in whatever capacity is needed in order for that breach of international law to end.
Gotcha.
The problem with that is, you know how the Security Council works, 50 members, 5 of them have veto, and they don't agree on anything. So,
which is by design, kind of, right? Like the goal was like,
exactly.
Yeah, I've heard people say, wow, permanent members, single vote veto, like this is bullshit. But the reality is, well, if China or Russia or the United States or who are the other two, what is like France and the UK? I don't even know. I should know this.
Yeah, the victors of World War II.
Oh, God, I got it. Yes. If one of these people are disagreeing, you probably don't want to do it. That it is probably really important that any of these member states can say no, and like, one vote downvotes it, and kills it.
Imagine if veto power did not exist. The Cold War essentially would not have been a Cold War. It would have been the Third World War.
Sure.
Because if the UK, France, and the US used their majority to authorize force against the Soviet Union, well, that's the definition of war.
Sure.
So the veto power was established in order for nuclear powers, that was done in 1945, so I don't know if they were thinking about nuclear weapons, but they were thinking about the major powers in the world to not enter into war with them, even if the price to pay is to have a less powerful United Nations and to tolerate some injustices, because the greater purpose is to avoid World War II again. And again, if you have 100 people in the jungle, you don't have a state with police force. The first priority is for the 100 people not to begin massacring each other. So There's a big part of what you're saying that is true, but it's because of what I'm saying. The second part of my answer would be, well, it's not as bad as you say. There are other mechanisms. The you've been a bad boy thing might seem like it's not very important, but in a globalized world where international trade is so important, where your country having visas to travel, where your country having open diplomatic relations with others, being named and shamed and being isolated diplomatically is super, super, like, for instance, South Africa is the textbook example of this. One of the big reasons why they had to stop apartheid was they were absolutely isolated internationally, with a couple of exceptions, one being Israel, by the way. They had no access to buying weapons. They had no access to buying many raw resources. They were a pariah internationally. And that worked at that time. So.
Gotcha. Do you think, I'm sorry, this is just a super random question and it's very political and not fair to you and you don't have to answer it. I've heard somebody give the argument that the reason why South Africa comes out so strong and basically shits on Israel for being an apartheid state is somebody said it's because historically Israel has shit on South Africa hardcore for being an apartheid state, and it's kind of like just like a political revenge thing. Do you think there's any truth to that, or do you think that's just like a cope that Zionists say online or whatever?
I believe it's not correct, because at the time where the international community was the most mobilized against apartheid, so during the 70s essentially, Israel was one of the few international allies, be it outwardly or informally, that South Africa had. So for instance, the South African nuclear program was developed with help from Israel. Israel was one of the few nations that exported weapons to South Africa. So perhaps the current government of South Africa, which is the ANP, which were essentially the main opposition to apartheid, now have a more of an anti-Israeli bias because Israel ostensibly supported the previous government, which was the apartheid government. That's my understanding. Again, I'm not an expert on this thing.
Okay. Oh God, it just slipped my mind. I had one other random. Maybe I'll remember this later. Okay. All right. We've covered some of this. UN resolutions. Oh, actually, wait. Here's a question I'll have. Okay. I can't tell who actually like studies in school anymore. Okay. Because I've met so many people that have bachelors and even do more research who are just retarded. Okay. I don't think you are. I hope you're not. Okay. Sorry. You've read like full papers and stuff, not just like the abstract or not just whatever random 2 lines or Twitter headlines, right? Like you do real study and research and all of this, I'm assuming, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, if I don't have time, I may go straight to the conclusion to see
that's
what
fine.
I'm about to read is relevant or not. But generally, I read the whole thing.
Yeah, okay. This is an issue or a feeling that I have. And you can tell me if I'm totally unjustified or I just don't understand because I've seen this. Or you can say like, okay, well, there's a reason for that, or just like talk me through this. Okay, here's an issue that I have, okay? If I'm going to read, okay, let's say somebody's going to say, I think that the blockade in Israel, the blockade against the Gaza Strip, I think that's illegal, okay? And here's something that's showing it to be illegal, all right? In my mind, what I'm going to imagine I'm going to read is I'm about to get like a 50 to 100 page thing analyzing like, these are what we say under international law, it justifies a blockade, this is what makes it illegal, this is what Israel's doing, here's the stated reasons, this is the effect that it's having, et cetera, going boom, 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 boom. And then at the end of this basically massive analysis, it's gonna say like, it is the ruling of these people or this court or the determination of this panel that given these collections of facts, this blockade is absolutely in contravention of any international norm, law, et cetera, right? When I see UN resolutions that I've been linked by people saying, oh, the blockade is illegal, it's like 2 paragraphs, which seems insane to me. Like, how can you say like in 1 paragraph, well, it seems like the Palestinians are suffering a lot, there's no good reason for this. And then the second paragraph is like, therefore we think it's illegal internationally. Can you help me sort through that? Like, should I be looking for more or is it, or am I having an unfair opinion and like things already? Yeah, no. Talk me through that. Yeah, okay.
You should be looking for more. What people are probably sending you is either Security Council or UN General Assembly resolutions.
Always General Assembly, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Think about the General Assembly, a little bit of context. When after the 60s, when most African nations became independent, there was established a new majority of states that did not represent the majority of legal expert opinion on many matters, and did not represent the opinion of the major powers, the people that the countries that ruled the world informally, economically, politically, etc.
Okay.
But they had a majority in the General Assembly. The non-aligned movement, for instance, was a big one.
Okay.
And they started using their majority to make resolutions that became kind of, I'm not going to say empty because they are relevant. I'm not going to explain their relevance now, but did not conform to the opinion of jurists and the opinion of major powers. So the General Assembly, as you know, does not have the power to make binding resolutions, right? So essentially they are political resolutions. Sometimes they scholars call them soft law, which means it's not directly binding, but it has a lot of authority because it's kind of if the UN was a state, Security Council would be the government, the General Assembly would be the Congress, right? So it has a lot of weight, political weight, and in many instances, what they say, if certain requirements are accomplished, can become law via the customary law thing that I've explained before.
Okay.
Right. So, for instance, if enough states go to the General Assembly and vote in favor of this, and then there's a bunch of practice aside from that, a court could conclude, well, there is enough here to say this is customary law.
Okay.
So it's important, but the form that it usually takes is half legal, half political. There's a lot of political statements, and they do not justify generally their assertions. Their assertions might be well grounded in law. So, for instance, if the General Assembly says this is illegal, it doesn't mean that it's asserted hackadaisically, like without taking care of the legal side of things. But they won't justify it outright.
Okay.
What you should be looking for is so special rapporteurs reports, for instance, or UN panel expert opinions, or just scholarly papers. So for the blockade thing, I recommend the 2011 Palmer report. This was a report made by a commission led by, I think it was a UK guy called Geoffrey Palmer, that was convened by the UN Secretary General in order to inquire as to the factual part of the blockade, like what happened, and for the legal side of things. This is what I've based my notes around the blockade on.
Oh shit! I think I might have read this. Didn't they basically say that the blockade was basically okay on this, or no?
Yes and no. So they only focused on the naval side of the blockade. They didn't talk about the rest of it. That's one. And second, they said there was non-proportional use of force.
Correct. Even the ICC found that there were likely war crimes committed by some of the IDF soldiers, although in their definition, very, very, very strictly, this was something I also didn't realize. The definition of like one of the war crimes, like very strictly, was like, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember the section, subsection, subsection, but it's like if a member of a military of a state kills somebody who is not a party to like an international conflict between their state and somebody else, that is always considered a war crime. Like even if it was like theoretically justified, like if somebody boarded a vessel and someone else came running up with a knife to stab them to death and the guy shot and killed them, even if it was like on that circumstance, like, oh, well, it was justified self-defense, blah, 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 it would still be considered a war crime because a military person is killing somebody who's not a party to an ongoing military conflict. Is my understanding that correct, or is that not correct?
I do believe it's correct.
Okay.
So for the MB Marmara, I think it was called.
Yes.
Again, the Palmer report is not. It is controversial, so it's not. Not everyone will agree on it, but I think it's legally pretty sound. But essentially, they said is, well, one, a naval blockade is a military tactic that is employed in the context of military conflict, armed conflict. There is an armed conflict in Gaza, and Israel is blockading Gaza as a tactic in the context of that. So a vessel that is attempting to breach that blockade, well, then there's the issue of the legality of the blockade itself. But a vessel that is attempting that becomes, quote unquote, we read through this and a whole bunch of international stuff on this, but basically, like,
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, a military object.
Yeah.
In the course of boarding that, of course, you have to comply with international humanitarian law. You must take due care for civilians. You must obey the principle of distinction,
Yeah.
military necessity, proportionality, blah 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 blah. But if someone is attacking you, that person becomes a combatant. And the regular rules of war apply.
Sure. Well, although what I believe, because I read the ICC ruling, they did a preliminary, or they did like an investigation, and they had figured that war crimes were likely happened, but they were insignificant such that they didn't want to take it to the court for whatever that means. But in their mind, when I was looking at the ICC's determination if a crime had been committed, it seemed as though the only determining factors that were relevant for their analysis were fixated on whether or not even the militant people in the flotilla were a party to the conflict between Israel and the Gaza Strip, Israel and Hamas. And if it was determined that those people weren't assisting or trying to help or a party to Hamas, it was a war crime, period. It didn't matter if they became a combatant. It didn't matter if they attacked first. That was the only thing the ICC was trying to determine, and in terms of like whether or not that particular war crime committed. But for other international criminal things or whatever, I understand what you're saying, that, there's going to be determinations of how people act, and you could be considered a combatant if you fight, and blah, blah. It would be, under different conventions.
I haven't read this specific thing that you're saying, but I believe what you're referring to is not a war crime, but a potentially a crime against humanity. So a war crime can only be committed in the context of armed conflict, right? So it's either international or non-international military conflict as defined in the Geneva Conventions. If this vessel was held by the ICC to not be part of this conflict, right? Which the Palmer report, by the way, disagrees. They say they were attempting to breach a blockade that is a tactic employed in a conflict, and they are doing so, blah, blah. So
sure. Yeah, I understand what you're saying here. I'll show you this. The only reason I'm looking at this, and the only reason because I read fuck all of this shit, but I read through quite a bit of this. I'm shooting you this link, and you can look at it later. But this did have to do with particular war crimes that they had said likely were committed because of an Israeli combatant or a soldier had killed somebody that wasn't a party to the conflict. So this was an investigation related specifically to war crimes. I don't believe it was crimes against humanities, and I believe I could be wrong, and I believe that the sections and everything that they're citing were related to war crimes. Relating to killing people that weren't parties to an armed conflict. I wish I could remember like the section or the subsection. Or the articles,
so you mean just civilians?
Of course, that's what they consider it. Civilians. Yeah.
So if you kill civilians in the framework of a military conflict and it doesn't comply with the requirements for killing civilians, this is a very grim way of putting it, the requirements for killing civilians, of course that's a war crime.
Yeah. So like for some of this here, like reading a quote, in order to amount to direct participation in hostilities, an act must not only be objectively likely to inflict harm, that was obviously met, but it must also be specifically designed to do so in support of a party to an armed conflict and to the detriment of another. That was part of So okay.
I didn't understand your question because I thought you were referring to the fact of the vessel not being even around the area of the conflict. But what this is saying is being a part of the conflict, quote unquote, means you're a combatant. Combatant is the definition of what not a civilian is, and vice versa. So essentially they're saying, are they civilians or not for the purpose of the convention? Which it's debatable because the frontier between combatant and non-combatant is one of the most contentious things in international humanitarian law because there are a lot of edge cases, etc.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Okay, so we were on General Assembly resolutions. They're basically ways to kind of wag your finger at things, but the composition of Okay, so here's the thing that I'll say, and then you can talk about this or tell me about this, okay? Right now, I'm not a big fan of the composition of these General Assembly resolutions because it reminds me of the weakness of unicameral legislative bodies in that it's very hard to do a unicameral representation of a collection of states because there's so many different actors involved. And I feel like this is why, I could be totally wrong on this, but I think, don't most countries gravitate towards bicameral legislatures, or is that just like the United States and the United Nations? Or not, I'm sorry, not the United Nations, the European Union, where you have You've got your
Mostly.
lower house that's like purportedly done by population, and then you've got your upper body, your upper chamber is done like 1 vote per person. And the idea that like the UN is just like something that was pointed out by a Zionist guy, so take this in grain of salt or whatever, but like the idea that there's 60 Muslim countries that are part of the UN General Assembly and 1 Jewish country, and the fact that these Muslim majority countries, when it comes to Israel, are always voting as a bloc is like, well, fuck. Like, what does a UN General Assembly resolution really mean, especially when they're non-binding? Yeah, so my approach to this is like, I'm starting to look at these with a lot of criticism, which probably isn't good because it undermines the general authority or whatever of the UN. Yeah, I guess talk around that, or how do you feel about that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the classic issues that we have students debate in like first year international relations. Like, is the UN undemocratic? Because like Nauru has what, 40,000, 100,000 inhabitants, whereas China is like 1.4 billion. So, and they get the same vote in the General Assembly. There is no ponderation for population. Yeah. So that's one big issue. But again, the United Nations and international law as a whole is not designed to be a system that is legally, at least, balanced by economic power, political power, military power, or population. It's kind of a legal fiction. One of the consequences of these legal fictions, where each state has sovereignty and is equally sovereign, and no state is more than another, even though in practice, the US has a super big army and Andorra has, 100 policemen, right? Yeah. So it is a legal fiction. One of the consequences is that this gives rise to a lot of problems. These problems, I think, in the framing of the UN were the fact that the General Assembly cannot make immediately binding resolutions, I think was having this in mind, right? Okay. Where we don't know how many states are going to be independent in the future, members of the United Nations in the future. We don't know what are the reasons these nations might vote. We don't know the population that these nations will have, etc. So I think one safeguard is that they are not binding. However, again, very influential in the development of international law. There's
when international law is made or contravened or whatever, people are going to be citing or looking back at like, well, here's 50 General Assembly resolutions that have been adopted as part of like the customary or whatever feelings of everybody, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I can understand that for sure.
If in the future international court has to determine whether this is a norm of international law, a customary norm, etc., General Assembly resolutions is a big one. There's a kind of counterweight, quote unquote, to that, because the General Assembly in the UN Charter is tasked with the progressive development of international law. So they're kind of doing that when they're doing these semi-political, semi-legal resolutions that perhaps do not reflect the law as it is, but have a kind of a progressive look to that. The General Assembly created in the 50s the International the International Law Commission, which is essentially a UN body of experts, the highest experts in the world, probably, aside from the judges of the ICJ, and with the most authority. And what they do is they get all of what the states do, all of what they propose, the General Assembly resolutions, what the courts say, etc., and they make draft treaties. They're like, hey, we gotta regulate this shit.
Okay.
Some of what we've written, we are arguing is already law. Some of it perhaps isn't, but we submit this to you for you to convene a treaty and for more legal certainty to happen. Like. We're not going to have this, is this customary, is this not? General Assembly has said this, but no one knows if it's binding or not, etc. So we're going to have a treaty, we're going to have it in writing, and everyone will know this is binding upon all. So that's kind of the tempering kind of counter to the General Assembly sometimes is the ILC, which are more very legally scrupulous, and they only propose stuff that is very balanced and almost everyone can agree on. And some of the most important treaties in the world now have emerged out of the ILC. So, for instance, the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, the United Convention on the Law of the Sea. There's the draft articles on the international responsibility of states. So some of the bigger pillars of the international system have emerged out of this body that kind of answers to the General Assembly, but is way more juridically legally sound than
Okay.
the General Assembly.
Okay.
So yeah, long answer to say political influence, yes, to some extent. Legal influence, yes, to some extent. But don't take it with a grain of salt, because yeah, especially when it comes to issues that affect African states, majority Muslim states, etc., as the Palestine question, they will vote in bloc, but this will probably not reflect the opinion of the rest of the geographical areas of the world necessarily. So, for instance, the West will vote very differently, even though they often have the numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the blocks of like votes seem pretty shitty or pretty weird. Like if North America, how many countries are in North America? Is it considered just 3?
Well,
like
it depends on
Belize or Guatemala. I don't know if like Central America is considered North or South America, but like if like North America is voting as a block for something against like Africa, right? It's like, well, fuck, Or if Oceania is voting as a block against, Europe or something, like fuck, yeah.
The other big moderating force is the Security Council. The fact that it only has 15 members, 5 of which are permanent and have veto power, was designed to avoid the whatever excesses of General Assembly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you've got the Secretary General, which is the third kind of big power inside of the UN.
Gotcha. Wait, explain that. When you say Secretary General, I know Secretary General is asked to investigate and make rulings on things. What are the binding? Yeah, what is? Yeah.
Well, Secretary General has he's supposed to be this neutral force that is kind of the chief public official of the UN, right? So he's supposed to be, I think, less of a politician and more of a high representative of the bureaucracy of the UN. Right, because the substantive decisions are supposed to be taken by both the Security Council and the General Assembly. In practice, he's been delegated with a lot of very important functions. So, for instance, when the General Security Council or General Assembly decide to create a UN peacekeeping force, they delegate a lot of the day-to-day working of that to the Secretary General. Or, so, for instance, many agencies, UNESCO or UNICEF or FAO, the WHO, some of them are more autonomous than others, but ultimately all of them link to the Secretary General that acts according to the powers that he's been vested with. According to the
and then also,
charter,
wait, real quick, who is the Secretary General? What is the Secretary General? Like, who is that, and what is the process by which you elect him or appoint him?
I think he's chosen by proposal of either the Assembly or the Security Council, and it has to be approved by both.
Gotcha.
Right now is a Portuguese guy, Antonio Guterres. But
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah. He or she is usually, he so far is usually a former prime minister, former high diplomat, etc. Has, I think, a big voice, like a big loudspeaker. But different Secretary Generals have used this loudspeaker for more politicized and therefore more less legitimate, quote unquote, because like the legitimacy of the Secretary General of the UN works if he's kind of a defender of human rights, defender of quote unquote common sense causes, and then decreases when he is seen to take part in some conflict. So, for instance, one of the big things that the Secretary Generals have done historically is to broker peace deals. So it's essential for them to be seen as impartial.
That makes sense. In the United States, we've got something called the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and they fight for civil liberties.
Used to be very. Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm an avid listener of the Jesse Singal podcast.
Oh Jesus, okay. All right, I don't know what Jesse said about it, but yeah, the ACLU's mission seems to have been pretty undermined by the adamant anti-Trump fervor, then the political driving. So now people look, which damages their credibility.
For sure, they used to defend Nazi demonstrations, and now they struggle to defend free expression of people who question gender norms. It's like,
It's like insane. Okay. I guess so. Then here's, like broader questions now. Now I feel like for my broader questions, they're worthless questions now. Yeah, I guess like, do you think that like the blockade, or has it been ruled that like the blockade on the Gaza Strip is illegal? Do you think it's fair to say that, or what are the arguments like for or against that? Yeah,
I would say I agree with broadly with the Palmer report, but other experts that kind of criticized the Palmer report, said, well, his assessment only concerns the naval blockade, which is a very small part of where the Gaza Strip gets its its source of food and water and medicines, etc. So perhaps the naval blockade might be legal, but what is certainly not legal is a total blockade. And there's Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention essentially prohibits the collective punishment. You've perhaps heard about this. That's one source of the alleged illegality.
Okay.
Collective punishment, it's what the name says, right? So essentially Israel would say, well, you've elected Hamas, so now I'm going to punish not individually people for their criminal offenses, but the whole of the Gaza Strip.
Can I ask a question related to this?
Yep.
When we talk about collective punishment, making things illegal or bad, wouldn't every single like tariff or every single sanction be considered like a form of collective punishment?
No, because a sanction is not like a something done in the context of warfare by one of the belligerents.
Okay.
Right. So.
Okay, so there's only because some people would say like our sanctioning of like Iran has caused damage to the civilian population, but since we're not at war with Iran, you're saying that that's not really a.
I mean, it could be illegal, but it wouldn't be illegal under the Geneva Conventions.
Okay,
right?
I understand. Gotcha. Okay.
Because they're not applicable to that. It could be illegal. So, for instance, after the first Gulf War and before the Iraq War, a very, very tight regime of sanctions was established against Iraq that banned the entry of even food and medicines. And a lot of people died as a result of that, even though the sanctions themselves had, sound legal reasons to exist because of what the Saddam regime did. Afterwards, in reflection, many legal experts said, well, a sanction it would be unlawful if the effects would be, general famine, general violation of human rights of the inhabitants of that state, etc. So that would probably be legal if the effects were. It's always comes back to the consequences. It's not about how harsh the sanction is. Because if Iran is self-sufficient in everything and we sanction the fuck out of them, but no one dies of famine, then the sanctions can be perfectly legal.
Okay, that seems really weird. That seems to be the opposite, because usually for crimes you're looking at intent, not outcome.
Yeah, but because the sanctions could be formally, legally. Let's say what a sanction is. So, remember I told you about countermeasures before. Yeah. Countermeasure is when a state does it before another state.
Okay.
A sanction would be if
in response to something.
No. On behalf of the UN Security Council. So the UN Security Council said, I prohibit every single member of the UN to trade arms with Iran. So that's a sanction against Iran. Gotcha. Whereas if the US singularly, the US calls them sanctions, but technically they would be countermeasures if done only on behalf of the US and not on behalf of the UN.
Okay.
Right.
Can I ask, and then also for like, for how does it work for military? Did the United States actually, the second Gulf War, when we deposed Saddam Hussein, is that considered a war?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, because I thought that I could be wrong. I have to go back, or maybe we did. I just don't remember. Wasn't there an argument that we had? It was an AUMF, the authorized use of military force, so we didn't have to get like a second like approval of military conflict or whatever. Yeah. So, okay, but that's still considered, I guess, a war in the or I'm sorry. Yeah. I should be misunderstanding the facts. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No. You understand them correctly, but there's a couple of distinctions. Like first, you don't see the word war being used in legal documents anymore because it's fallen out of fashion. We don't call them Ministry of War anymore. We call them Ministry of Defense, etc.
Gotcha.
So now, for instance, we talk about the law of armed conflict because whatever. That may be one reason you don't see the word war. Formal declarations of war don't happen anymore. Okay. That's first. And then second, AUMF, I think that's internal U.S.
correct
legal authorization. That's not relevant for international law. I think what you're referring to is that one of the arguments the US used to defend their use of force against Iraq before the UN was that they were using the same authorization by the Security Council that they had used in 91 against Saddam in 2003.
Okay.
That's a very bad argument on my in my opinion, but that was the argument that was used. But at any rate, of course, it's a war. Like a war is assessed.
Not domestically or internally, but by the UN. So like when Russia says
No,
special
no.
military
It's
operation, it's like still considered a war, right?
empirically, it's assessed empirically. If a war is happening, you don't need a court or the UN to say war is happening.
Okay.
If there are different definitions, scholarly, some people put the threshold in, more than 1,000 casualties, or some people, but like the different academic definitions. But a war is assessed, looking at whether there's military action that is persistent, that has a certain degree of severity and casualties and destruction, etc. There's no, you don't need to wait for anyone to say this is a war for it to be a war.
Okay, I understand. Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to bring on somebody else. I was supposed to bring on 30 minutes ago to chat. IRI about stuff. Is there any like final points you want to hit, or any other thing you wanted to comment on? And you're also free to come on tomorrow or the day after, or to chat more, because obviously there's a lot of people that want to argue about stuff or whatever. Yeah.
Great. Well, not tomorrow but I appreciate the offer. I'm just a couple of points on this that we didn't get to touch on apartheid and genocide that are very important. Apartheid. I would encourage you, if you have time, I'll send you some resources to look at what's the definition of apartheid and whether it applies to Palestine, because it's being thrown around a lot. And then second, for genocide. And you'll see that it's way more, of course, it's more complex than people are aware of. You need intent, you need a systematic situation of oppression that has to be assessed against, blah, blah. There has to be inhumane acts, etc. And then second point, when you're reading this, just be aware that there are two responsibilities in parallel: the individual criminal responsibility of the people doing it, and the responsibility of the state of Israel for not suppressing it, not preventing it, etc.
Gotcha.
So parallel responsibilities.
Okay.
And
well, hey, for when we
point,
get into this in the future, because I imagine you'll come back and we'll chat again. So do you think that Israel is right now effectively committing a genocide against the Palestinians, and do you think that there is do you think there is an apartheid argument to be made?
I think there's a strong case to be made for an apartheid. It wouldn't apply for all of the points in time, for all of the territories equally, and there's an argument to be made as to what of the inhumane acts that are listed as part of the definition of apartheid, which of them are being done, by whom, what severity, and in what territories, etc. But I think the threshold has been met. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, I think, agree with me. They have the press releases that are very political, but if you dig a little bit, both of them made legal reports that are very well argued. I would say it's kind of, you can read the heading, and get like a very political sense from both of them. But
I've read the press releases, but I haven't seen like the underlying, if they've got larger reports on it. I haven't seen that yet. Okay.
They covered their asses legally before making those statements. So the reports are very good, I think.
Okay, cool. All right, we can talk more in detail about that when you want, whenever you're free next. So
Great. Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Again, I've been watching since 2018, so it has been a weird experience, and hopefully I can come in a couple of days.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Sorry for delaying this so much too. We were going to talk like 5 days ago, and I've been taking time off stream so. But thanks, I really appreciate it.
No
Thank
worries,
you so much.
man. Yep.
All right,
bye.
have fun.
What's up, bro?
Oh, hey, what's up? Do you disagree with anything I just said?
A little bit.
Yeah, go hit me up.
Yeah. So I think that you're right, obviously, that like jurisdictional questions as an initial matter are super important for American law or for really any place, like what law applies.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's like irrelevant, but I think you're misunderstanding what people are invoking, quote, international law for. And they're basically saying, is the conduct that we're describing, or the behavior, is it consistent with this body of doctrines that we call, or ideas, norms that we call international law? The question isn't like, will ultimately someone have the power to stop it? We know that the international community is an anarchic society, right? It's not really structured the same way as a domestic legal system. But the question is just, is it compatible? Is it consistent with these principles? And you might think that it's a moot point because they're not going to be enforced, but isn't it a worthwhile exercise to question whether or not some action is consistent with some set of norms and principles? Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
So you might say that
I think like I mean, well, like, I think I obviously agree, right? Like, I think we can both think of like a million things where it's like, let's say Israel starts using tactical nuclear weapons in the Gaza Strip, right? I think we would both agree, like, okay, this is clearly like not good. I think that the issue, oh God, I just had it. The issue that I'm running into, the issue that I think is difficult here, and maybe you can speak, I guess, in terms of U.S. law on this, or international law, is when Israel feels like it's in a surrounding area where none of the people around it have to play by any of these international norms, but Israel is expected to. I think Israel might feel a little bit shitty when, like, let's say Spain says, well, hey, Israel, we have to play by these rules, so you do too, because we're all part of the same international community. And, Israel's like, okay, well, congratulations, you're bordered by fucking Portugal and France, okay? My borders are shared with fucking Assad, fucking Lebanon, okay? And I've got, it's not the same. So I think the thing that Israel is focused on, and you can argue me out of this or you can argue against this, because I think this I understand, I can empathize with this point. Israel argues we're held to a standard in this region that nobody else seems to give a fuck about and nobody else has to play by. So we're going to do what we can to protect our own interests first before being subsumed by some international code of conduct that nobody else around here is playing by. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to start by saying I don't have any specific expertise in international law, and so you guys should discount anything I'm saying other than just being someone who's observing this conversation. So just as a thorough clear.
Sure.
On your specific thing, like, there could be an argument for why these, quote, international norms, international rules are inconsistently applied, or that for whatever reason Israel should not be bound by them. But that's a kind of separate question from, is Israel's actions consistent with those rules and principles? It's a different question. One is like, should they be bound by these rules, and does it make sense for them to be bound by these rules? A different question is what Israel's doing in contradiction with those principles? And that can be answered whether or not you have some reason why different rules should apply or an exception should be made. Isn't the answer whether or not it's consistent useful to sort of, or do you think it's a purely useless comparison?
No, you're right. These are two different tracks of argumentation. So, for instance, you're saying I could make the argument that Israel doesn't feel like they have to adhere to any of these international norms because nobody else around them does. And then you could say, okay, fine, but that's a separate argument of, are they in contravention of those international norms, right? You can say, yes, Israel is functioning in a way that most people would probably say is, contravening these norms or is illegal. But Israel also doesn't feel they're two separate tracks of arguments, right? That's fair. That's a fair statement to make, sure.
And you could say something like, well, I don't think that these international rules should govern or should apply unless everyone has to follow them or unless they're enforced as against anyone. That's a position that you could have. But the question about whether or not they're consistent is a good one, because there are a lot of countries that are not, specifically signed on to the ICC, right, who have not accepted that jurisdiction.
Wait, hold on one second. Sorry, Jesus. Okay, keep going.
Are you okay?
I hope so, yeah.
Okay.
But not really. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just saying that there are a bunch of countries that haven't signed on to the jurisdiction of the ICC, as I understand it.
Yeah.
But there's more international law than just those, than the Rome Statute. There are notions of international law, the rules of war that go back to like the 19th century. And so the question, I think, is, it's not as interesting to me, and it would mean that there's like a way to get out of ever analyzing the international law question if any country that just decides not to be a part of the Rome Statute were free from that analysis. Then we could never say things that Russia do are against international law. Now, you could say, well, it's useless to analyze that under that framework anyway, but then you're just saying that doesn't matter.
Sure. So backing up a bit, the reason why I guess I'm not as sympathetic here is, let's say that I show you a video of a guy who's clearly beating the shit out of somebody, okay? Beats the shit out of him, leaves, breaks his arm or whatever, guy stops fighting him, okay? If I showed a video of this and I'm supposed to determine this guy assaulted him and you injured him and it was aggravated, blah, 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 it's like, okay, yeah, clearly you did, that's bad. If you tell me beforehand though, okay, well, this was a UFC fight, well, I'm like, okay, well, fuck, this guy signed up for it, right? If I've got a whole bunch of countries None of these people have submitted any of their autonomy to the ICJ. None of them are interested in rulings from the ICC. But the rest of the world wants to come down and say, well, hold on, Israel, you're doing a bad thing with Syria here in the Golan Heights. And it's like, the Syria, the country where the leader just fucking gas attacked, like 80, however what percentage of their population, Syria clearly doesn't give a fuck about the international courts. The Golan Heights was a staging ground for attacks against Israel. They clearly don't care about the international courts or the way they conduct themselves. So why do I even care about the ICJ has no jurisdiction to even rule on it. So why would I even care what the legal opinion would be here if they don't have the jurisdiction and neither side is submitting themselves to the jurisdiction of the ICJ to make a ruling on it? Yeah, go ahead.
Right. That's a more global question of does this analysis even matter? Should we be analyzing this under the framework of international law?
Yeah.
At all?
Oh, and then also just real quick on your last example, because you were about Russia invading Ukraine. My understanding, and I haven't looked at it actually. ICC signatories map. Say for instance, Ukraine had signed on to a lot of these international court things or whatever, and then Russia invaded them. Ooh, and it looks like maybe they haven't. Then I might feel a certain way about that, as opposed to Russia invading random countries that aren't at all signed on to any of these things. Belarus and Ukraine. Yellow means that they withdrew a signature. Or what does yellow mean again? I forgot. Sorry, but go ahead.
I think there's a difference between signing it and ratifying it within the appropriate channels in your country.
Oh, sure. Maybe that might be it. Yeah. Signed but not ratified. Okay.
My response to that would be these principles, the international principles, whatever they are, right? And some are in contradiction. I think someone was talking earlier about a problem where you had someone who seemed very smart on this issue. There were two kind of competing principles. One, which is this long storied notion of sovereign immunity or immunity of delegates or international immunity when it comes to
heads of state, especially.
Right. Diplomatic immunity versus the norm of following the ICC warrant or whatever. And so sometimes it's not clear what these principles are, which way they point. They can be used. They can be argued one way or the other. So I'm not saying that there's a clear body of international law where it's all synchronized and everything makes sense and there's no hard cases. But ultimately, the principles were designed, I think, to be universal. It's different than domestic law.
Can you clarify that when you say principles designed to be universal? Which principles?
The rules of war, for example.
Okay.
Right.
Sure.
The rules of war are meant to apply to everybody. I think maybe someone can tell me they're wrong, but the notion of these kind of baseline rules is that the intention is that for everyone to follow them, and that they should never, you should never be using chemical weapons even in the most dire circumstances. And so, given that the hope is, I think, that these rules are applied universally and that everyone follow them, even though there are problems with enforcement, I think it's a worthwhile exercise to compare the conduct and say, hey, when Russia attacks these civilians, it's targeting them specifically, and that's a war crime. Or to say, this amounts to apartheid, and at least there's been some significant amount of countries who have characterized that as a crime worth labeling as an international crime.
Sure. There's going to be there's going to be some crimes here where I agree with you, right? Where even if let's say Syria and let's say Syria and Israel haven't submitted anything to the ICJ, they don't care for any jurisdiction there. If these guys started fucking nuking or chemical weapons attacking each other, we're doing a NATO mission or we're doing a UN mission and shit is going to change, right? Obviously this is not okay. Or if a country begins to genocide its own population, even if they're not part of the UN or something. Iraq must have been part of the UN, right? Am I fucking retarded? Wait, because they were demanding UN inspectors.
Iraq part of the UN. Yeah, I think Iraq was part of the UN. Yes.
Yeah. What was Saddam Hussein's argument for for killing all of his people?
Well,
did he have arguments, or did he just not give a fuck about it?
You mean in the
first Gulf War? Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay, I have no idea.
Well, I think the gassing occurred under the Iraq-Iran war.
I think so. Yeah, I mix this up a lot. Yeah, the invasion of Kuwait was bad, but it was in the Iraq-Iran war that Saddam Hussein was deploying a lot of chemical weapons. Was really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So would you have any problem? I don't think that it's inconsistent for you to say something like, it does break international law for Bashar al-Assad to chemical gas his own people, because otherwise you would say, tankies who support Assad could say, well, why should Bashar al-Assad have to follow international law because Israel doesn't? It's the same argument. But that doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't give you a shortcut to answering the harder moral question. You're correct, right? Well, something that people like to do I've noticed is that people like to do a little shortcut or a short circuit to say oppressor, oppressee, and therefore we know Israel's wrong. Or human shield versus not human shield, therefore everything Israel does is correct. In my opinion, there's no shortcut to doing the hard moral calculus and getting into the nitty gritty. But people are trying to short run it by saying international law violation, therefore Israel wrong.
Yeah, I guess the moral question is really hard here too, though. Like, for instance, like, is it immoral to eat pork or whatever? Like, I don't think so. But I'm in the United States where I've decided that. Like, what about what about like another country where it's illegal, right? Where they've got a law against it. I was like, well, if they want to prosecute me for it, that's totally fair. It's their country, it's their law. But when you start to run up into countries that are conflicting with each other, I don't know how to determine because I can't appeal to a Supreme Court.
Why couldn't you say something like this? That, well, you can analyze it yourself, right? Couldn't you analyze it yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, here, then I'll actually help me. Talk me through this. I'm super curious what you think.
Well,
okay?
I don't know the actual principle.
No. I'm just going to ask you like this the broad question. You can tell me. I really don't have I know I come out, it seems like I have a strong, I don't have a super strong opinion. I could totally, at the end of the day, I could see me being pro, like, yeah, there should be all the settlements in the Golan Heights, or like, yeah, Israel should demolish all these and give it back to Syria. I don't have like a strong position on it. But like, let's say that it was the case that one country tries to invade another. Okay, here, I'll just give you these facts, okay? And if somebody wants to argue this doesn't match Syria, fuck you, I don't care. But let's assume for the sake of the argument these are true, okay? One country is using a tactically superior area to launch attacks against another country. They do this for 5 years, and then eventually they try to invade that country. Let's say the invaded country, they decide to fight back, and then they re-invade the country that invaded them, and they capture that strategically important area, right? Now, let's say that they agree to a peace deal at the end and they chill, or not a peace deal, but like armistice, right? Does the country that took the territory back from the aggressor, from the belligerent, do they have a right to annex or keep that territory that they won in that war that the other party started? What do you think is the answer to that? And this isn't a gotcha. I don't even know the international law position on this. I don't know. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, so I don't know shit about international law from the nitty gritty about the right to annex or the right to conquer. I'm not sure what the right to conquer is, the right to annex. You're talking about the Golan Heights?
Yeah, that's what me and Dylan was talking about. Yeah, because that's because people are saying like, well, it's occupied territory. It's not fair. And it's like, well, is it occupied territory? I don't know. Like, if somebody's attacking from some area and then you conquer it from them in a war that they started, is it like, are you allowed to keep that, or is it immoral to keep that? Like, I don't know.
So that's a question. So there are kind of two questions there. One is, what does the international law say?
Yeah. Or no, I was on the moral question. I'm curious what you think the moral analysis is. Yeah.
On the moral question, I think it's not totally unreasonable for you to say something like, I want a final settlement of issues and I want a final resolution before we come to some grand bargain. It would be like one concept I have in civil law is oftentimes you have multiple claims against each other, right? Where somebody violates a contract, someone else, doesn't give them whatever remedy they're owed, or like there are multiple claims going at each other, and one is like beyond a doubt, without a dispute, like you owe them money under this part, but they also owe you something under their part. I can understand the inclination where someone's like, well, I'm not going to give over the money I know is indisputably theirs until we have a final settlement of all these civil issues, and everyone, we can sort of deduct the amount that I indisputably own from this final settlement of various issues. That to me makes some sense.
I don't like. I understand what you're saying here, and I understand your desire to do it because the American legal system is so cool. Okay, however, remember, it's international. For civil suits, ultimately, at the end of the day, a judge or a jury is going to make a decision on this. But what if two sides have an infinite disagreement? What if one side says, well, listen, we're going to hold on to this because we think you guys are going to keep attacking us from it. And the other side's like, okay, well, we never want peace with you. We're going to fight you forever. Would the defensive side have a right to annex that territory? And we can't appeal to just like a civil. I understand you're just using an example, not saying. I'm sorry.
I'm using that as an example to illustrate why I think that your position is not totally unbound from common sense. Where if you're saying that I don't want to give this over because I think you're going to immediately use it to disrupt me in the future, and I want to have assurances that you won't before I give it back, I can understand that rationale and why that you could ethically think that makes sense.
Sure.
And why you might want, there's a lot of crimes on both sides, let's say in the context of, I don't know a ton about the history of war crimes as between the Syrian regime and Israel, but let's say there's a ton of issues that are outstanding. I can understand your reluctance to only sort of address one side of it where it's indisputable.
Yeah.
I can understand that. But if someone were to ask you, either in the civil context when you're examining a contract where something's indisputably owed, or where you're analyzing the actions by Israel, if you just take those actions in isolation and examine them under whatever you want to call international law, you should be able to say, yes, it is okay under this body of international law or it's not. But
can you do that? Can you take
question.
those actions in isolation though? Like, don't you need a totality of circumstances to figure out? Like, if we look at like the Rittenhouse stuff, right? Like, nothing there could be taken in a vacuum. We had to do the whole start to finish to figure out, like, was this particular thing okay or not?
Right. So that gets to a question of international law, which is annexation for self-defense, or is conquering for alleged self-defense a decent argument? Or is a good
What do you think about it morally? Do you think morally it's an okay argument?
That's what, just so you know,
yeah,
that's part of Russia's rationale for annexing Ukraine.
Well, wait, hold on. While that's part of the rationale, we can evaluate the rationale. Right? Just because you use a certain reason doesn't mean that, like, because one person might use that reason, right? Because when I say, like, Rittenhouse is in self-defense and you say something like, okay, well, you know, O.J. Simpson said it was self-defense. I know he didn't, but, like, right? I was like, okay, well, that doesn't mean all self-defense claims are bad, right? We can look at, like, what is Ukraine's relationship to Russia? Does Russia have a reason to fear Ukraine? I think historically we can appeal to a lot of norms and say, absolutely not. When we look at Israel, does Israel have a reason to fear attacks on the Golan Heights? I mean, recent history, yeah, we can say, of course. So I think that, yeah, we can argue through the rationale, like, are they making good arguments to justify their actions, or...
Sure, but that would require it would not require for you to do that analysis, some final ruling from somebody, right? It would require you to think about it, know the principles, have a good argument for it. And we have the benefit in America and in other countries where there's like a final appeal to have somebody who decides firmly. No one denies that doesn't exist in the international stage. And so I think for these questions, the response shouldn't be like, well, let's just not worry about it until the ICC or the ICJ comes to a definitive ruling. It should be like, let's analyze it and let's see what thinkers think about it.
I kind of sort of agree with you, but I would say that, like, the analysis and the thinkers should be squarely focused on the resolution of the problem, not hyperfixated on the legal analysis. Like, at the end of the day, you can agree or disagree. Like, for when I look at, like, legal stuff to me is like medicine, right? The only reason why we go to a hospital is because we want a doctor to tell us what to do. That's the whole point. I'm not just going there for him to shit on me. I want, like, an action to remedy my issues. And courts are the same. When I go to a court, I don't want the judge to suck my dick or to, you know, like, call me an asshole for an hour. I want, like, I'm trying to resolve a problem. That's the whole reason why I go to these places. When we do these legal analyses of these, like, highly specific, incredibly intricate and complicated issues, like, the end result of these legal analyses sometimes, or I guess I feel like for the whole history of Israel, have been toothless. Like, who cares? Like, is it legal? Is it illegal? Like, it's not affecting any of the things on the ground right now. Israel clearly doesn't give a fuck. Syria obviously doesn't give a fuck. Like, none of the players in this region give a fuck. So why are we sitting here screaming at one party like, you're being illegal, when nobody here even cares about, like, any of the international norms or laws anyway? The only thing that's ever worked to move to any of these countries towards peace has been their bilateral agreements with each other they've negotiated. That's what's, like, gotten them there. So I feel like that should be the focus, not like, is it legal or is it legal? No, fuck it. Like, what do we need to do to make both parties feel whole, or at least both parties feel shitty?
Well, I think that's ultimately coming from a perspective where you don't really value these international norms. You don't value them. If you did value them, it wouldn't matter if Israel followed them or not. It's just like, let's say that you valued some set of rules that online content creators are supposed to follow. Let's say you make out the Stephen Bonnell rules for online content creators, and let's say 80% of people take the Stephen Bonnell rules for online content creators and 20% don't. If you value the Stephen Bonnell rules for online content creators, you're gonna, if people analyze other people's conduct according to those rules, you're gonna think that's a valuable analysis, whether or not those 20% of people signed up to it or not. Maybe if they signed up to it, you have another additional argument, institutional consent, that kind of argument. But the principles that you've espoused in this hypothetical set of rules you've given online content creators, if you value them, you're gonna apply them. Just like people who have a belief in this oppressor relationship, they apply it because they value those principles. Or if you're a Marxist, whether or not a country has accepted Marxism, you might apply those Marxist principles because you value those principles. And so ultimately, the question I think for you should be, do you value those principles? And is it useful to analyze countries under those principles?
Yeah. So for me, and this sucks to say, and listen, I made a lot of hard decisions in my life, okay? So maybe I would do the right thing. I really do try to. But sometimes I wonder if, and like, this isn't the same, everybody's different breaking points, okay? you've heard the phrase like everyone has a price, right? Sometimes I wonder how much your principles are subject to your circumstance. So for instance, one thing that I say is I don't do gambling sponsorships because I felt kind of uncomfortable about it. I might do like a poker one every now and then. I think one of my poker ones I'm be playing blackjack, which I didn't really like, fuck it, you know? But in general, I didn't do any of the CSGO lotto shit. I just don't like gambling sponsorships. It doesn't make me feel that good. No. I wouldn't do it if Stake wanted me to do it for kick. I just don't like supporting gambling. But I say that as somebody that makes a fuck ton of money. If I had 200 concurrent viewers and I was looking at my monthly payments and I probably don't have enough money to continue on streaming if I don't take these gambling sponsors, it would weigh on me heavily, right?
This is what people, can I just stop you right there?
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Because I think this is what people are afraid of.
Okay.
Because America, who, by the way, I generally support America.
Yeah,
I think
fine.
that liberal democracy is base as hell. And I think that America is the best superpower in the world, 100%. But what people have these rules for is they don't want everything to just be a matter of, well, I do it because I can or because I want to or because we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. These rules are intended to be a set of consistent principles that even countries that we like aren't able to take advantage of. And so if there's like a rule that says no intervention unless X certain criteria is met, the reason we have that rules is so that the people who have the most power aren't able to use, intervene whenever they want to, just like you, right? The reason you might have a rule, which is I don't do gambling, sponsorships, that rule, I hope, is a rule that you have because you think that they're bad. But if everyone thought as you did, where, okay, but if I'm really down to the last paycheck, I'm going to do it, then the rule becomes toothless. And it's just like whenever the people who are streaming, who want to, or who have the power, who can avoid responsibility, they'll do it. Does that make any sense?
No, I agree. Yeah, because we don't want to feel like every principle or norm that we have breaks down. Not to be edgy as fuck, but like you've seen The Dark Knight, right?
Yes.
Yeah, remember when the Joker is doing his little speech about like people are only as good as society allows them to be and blah, 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 right? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that sentiment, right? I think that, here's another thing. Like when I look at, so here's something, I've had this issue when I deal with people publicly, okay? Like I try not to tell lies about people, okay? Because I think it's bad. But I've kind of done it. I've been flexible in the past, right? I said Demon Mama might have posted that thread on 4chan. Hassan went and fucked those hookers, at the place that got like raided by blah, blah, blah. I don't even know if technically the second one's not untrue. But I've engaged in it. And when I've done it, my reputation will be like, oh, why would you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, okay, sure. But it's frustrating for me to play by these rules when these other people aren't playing by these rules. But I think that it helps when I play by these rules because it makes me look good to other people. It's a virtue signal, right? I'm showing that this is something I feel strongly about, so I'm going to try to conduct myself in this way. And when I look at international law and international norms, I kind of see it the same way. The reason why you follow these, and you can see this in leadership, probably when U.S. leadership talks to itself, you definitely see it when Israeli leadership talks to itself, that people think like, okay, well, if we do this, nobody's going to support us. We're going to get fucked. We have to adhere to this rule. We cannot attack here first. We cannot preemptively do this. We can't let this happen because if we do, the U.S. isn't going to support us. These people aren't going to support us, right? Which is okay. So when I look at international principles and stuff like that, that's kind of how I feel, right? Now, I'm making this more like streamer related. Okay, I'll relate this. I have a rule where I really, 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 really do not like to try to get people banned on almost any circumstance, unless somebody's like flagrantly violating TOS, right? So like if you're spamming racial slurs, if you're supporting terrorism or terrorist organization, oh shit. Shit. No, I'm sorry. We're not gonna, right? But like if you're doing something where it's like, okay, well, hey, this is clearly in violation of TOS here, like this is fucked up, blah, blah. But like for the most part of like all larger, I don't lead like report brigades. When I see people doing it on my subreddit, I either downvote it or ban the thread. Or like, guys, we don't like spam report here, generally. Don't do this, blah, 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 right? That might be a feeling that I have, okay? And that's a strong virtue that I have, and I try to signal to other people and I don't do it, even though I'm surrounded by people like Nick Fuentes or these other guys that try to do it to me, right? But let's say that I felt like I am not going to DMCA anybody or I'm not going to attack people's channels like this because I don't want to do that. Let's say that I find out that a whole bunch of these tankies and alt-righters are convening in like a Discord channel, and this Discord channel, they're like, okay, here's the plan. I'm not going to say this plan out loud because it's a way to maybe actually get channels banned, but like they come up with a plan where like they can actually get my channel banned on kind of bullshit, but they can do it. They actually are able to do it, right? Now let's say I look at this and I say, well, these guys also spam some racial slurs in here, or they do some other shit that like it's probably not okay, blah, 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 blah. Would I adhere to my principle in this point of I'm going to stick to my principle. I'm not going to report this channel. And you know what? If my YouTube gets shut down and permabanned and I have to retire, that's fine. At least I stuck to my principles. Or in this case, am I going to be like, you know what? Fuck it. We're spam reporting this Discord and shutting it down. I'm not losing everything to adhere.
Well, it depends
to
on what your principle is. If your principle is never under any circumstances do this, then that's what your principle is, and then you would be going against your principles. If
Yeah.
your principle was, my principle incorporates some kind of self-defense thing, then that's some self-defense standard.
Oh,
that isn't
wait.
just arbitrary.
Yes. I love that you said that. Okay. So I'm going to say like a couple words and then I want you to speak on this. Like, I'm so curious,
Yeah.
right? I agree 1,000,000%. I think it's less than self-defense though, or more than self-defense. I think it's reciprocity. And that comes to the ICJ stuff and everything else, right? If somebody is adhering to some level of reciprocity with me, then of course I'm going to do my best to adhere to my principles, even if we disagree and blah, 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 blah. But once that reciprocity is out the window, shit gets weird real fast. And then, yeah.
Okay, so my response to that is, I was under the impression that there are certain international principles that are really like, there is no circumstance in which people should do this.
Sure.
And what I mean is like no reasonable circumstance, because I think that like
nuclear weapons, chemical warfare, torturing prisoners of war, Rome Statute stuff.
Those principles are supposed to be like, you should never do this. That's what the whole idea I think of them is.
For sure.
Which is, regardless of the self-defense interest, you should never be deliberately targeting civilians.
I agree.
And so my question would be like, if there was evidence, some leaked cable of the IDF saying, hey, this is a good place to kill civilians and we should shoot it in order to kill civilians, and we don't have any, and like, let's say it was as deliberate as that, and like, we don't have any information of any Hamas people in there, we just know that there's a lot of civilians there, you would be outraged, right?
Yeah, of course.
Everything about your position on Israel-Palestine, in terms of the fundamental structures there, probably would remain the same. But you would, that action and that sort of perspective from the IDF would be enough, maybe even for you to like rethink this whole strategy, wouldn't it? I mean,
that's why the intelligent people that argue this issue, they try to argue that Israel has always had these aims, these territorial conquests, these expansionist goals, because they know that if they can establish that argument, then you have a strong argument for like, okay, well, Israel isn't that.
That's true whether or not they're part of the Rome Statute, or whether or not like that. You would think that whether or not they submitted to the jurisdiction of these bodies.
Yeah, I agree. But the thing that you brought up was, it's really important, is that like, there are certain things you never do, right? In the United States, even if I grant you the most unlimited right to self-defense, you don't have the right to torture or rape somebody, right?
Right.
That guy broke into my house, he was gonna kill my grandma, so of course I had to rape him for 30 minutes. What the fuck? No, you don't have the right to do that, right? So, but the question is we have to identify what are those actions, because genociding somebody is obviously bad. Is conquering territory from a belligerent and then settling it, is that one of those things that's way over the line?
What if you don't like? Okay, I don't know, because I'm not. You should bring the international lawyer guy back on, because I don't actually know the mechanics here. And I preface this: I do not know.
Sure, that's fine.
And basically, about international.
Well, but at the very least, you recognize that there is a difference, right? That like
sure.
I don't know in this case, and I'm not trying to make you take a strong position on this, right? Because I understand, but like in this case, like conquering land from a belligerent and settling it, that's not. We can at least agree that's not clearly as obviously wrong as like genociding a people or using chemical weapons or torturing prisoners.
I agree, it's not as clearly wrong as that.
Yeah, but is it over the line of like, it is clearly wrong, you shouldn't do this? Yeah, that's.
I think the rules against those kinds of action is, we're trying to establish norms against the wars of conquering that were so prevalent in the 20th century and in the 19th and 18th centuries, where there was a lot of conflict that was explicitly done for conquering purposes, whether you have the wars in Europe or elsewhere, or like Italy's going to Ethiopia or whatever to try to conquer, and that we need to have a norm that's very, very like repellent against those kinds of conflicts or those kinds of aims. I think that was the intent of it. And so this is me knowing nothing about international law, just heads up. That's what I think is the rationale.
Okay.
Or one of the rationales. In the context of a quote defensive annexation for defensive purposes, I can conceptualize that as potentially justified, but what are the kinds of things that would determine whether it was justified or not? And so what are the factors, right? In self-defense, deadly self-defense in the context of individuals, we have some factors we look at.
Yeah.
Reasonable, is it reasonable? Was he in reasonable fear for his life? Did he have no less whatever alternatives?
Yeah.
What do you look to justify a quote defensive annexation?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like, what is the reasonable threat to this country here? How has the other side responded to attempts to settle for peace or negotiations? Is there actually an advantage to Israel conquering this land, right? Do they actually gain a tactical advantage? Does it even help or strengthen their position? And then I think there must be some analysis of civilian impact as well, right? Like if they conquered the Golan Heights and 30 million people live there and they had to expel all of them, that's probably too much collateral damage, right? So these would probably all be things that would factor into your analysis here, I would say. Yeah.
So if there were like a lot of people living in those areas, the denial of certain rights to them or doing something that would displace them would undermine, you would think, the right of the country to do a, quote, defensive annexation.
Of course. And I think this is why the strategy of Russia, of India, and of Israel is to move more and more and more people in, because they realize it gives them a stronger claim to the land. Because at some point, Israel's going to be like, bro, what is it in the Golan Heights? Is it over 100,000 people? At some point, it's going to be like, bro, we got 500,000 people. We can't move. Come on, bro. You're ethnically cleansing us? Seriously? Like, that's the whole goal of moving more and more people in, is it gives them a stronger claim to the land.
So here's a question for you. If there were no threat to Israel from these areas, or you perceive no threat from Syria towards Israel, what would you think about the annexation?
If there was no threat towards Israel from the Golan Heights, then the annexation would be clearly wrong, I think. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what would get you to change your mind on whether this annexation is justified?
I mean, it would be like if there was no real security threat, would be one thing. If Syria had tried to push for peaceful negotiations to negotiate some return of the Golan Heights in exchange for some bilateral peace agreement or something, that would be another thing. I think those would be the two things.
Okay.
Yeah. Those would be two big things, I think, yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, buddy, I just wanted to come in to say essentially that I think that there's value, that these principles are around for reasons, and they may have exceptions, and they may have reasons why they're not followed, or reasons why certain things are justified in different times. But I think that when people are analyzing actions taken by states under those principles, it's not like necessary for us to get into this game about whether they actually submitted to the certain conventions or agreements if the principles by themselves are useful.
Well,
and I think that a lot of these principles are useful.
Kind of. Here's how I view it, okay? In the U.S. courts, all right, if I'm right at the end of the day, right, if the facts are on your side, pound the facts, if the laws are on your side, right? If I'm right at the end of the day, if the laws are on my side or the facts, right? Yeah, I don't, and you know what? Every single motherfucker in the United States, all 329 million people can fucking hate me. If I'm right, I'm right. Fuck you, okay? Because the law is the law, and if I win, I win, okay?
Wait.
Yeah?
Just stop right there.
Yeah.
Why are you right?
Because I appeal to a body.
So, right?
No, I'm right because the person who said so was a third-party institution that everybody in my country has agreed to submit their authority to.
And that bottom, like the anarcho-capitalists are right, which is the reason why it's correct is because someone with a gun is going to enforce that ruling by that body. Fair?
Yeah.
I mean, that's ultimately what's going on. Law is not this thing that exists in the world. There's no, these are just rules and ideas and words that are interpreted by people. And so there's no like, quote, right answer apart from like what people are willing
hold
to
on,
fight.
wait. Well, this was the second part of this, I was gonna say, right? Is that like, at the United States, there is a right or wrong answer, and it will be enforced at the end of the day by the end of a gun, right? It will be, because But my issue is that
it's because of that, right? It's because you're right, because we have an institution that's called the Supreme Court. They answered the question, and that question has institutional legitimacy, and people are going to enforce it at the end of a gun. That's the pathway. But in terms of like the actual right or the objective rightness or the objective wrongness, at bottom, right, even in the American legal system, there are a lot of people who disagree with a lot of Supreme Court rulings, and there's no like
but all you can do is kick rocks.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, there's nothing different in the international context.
No, wait.
We don't have. Let me just finish. We do not have this kind of final body that's going to be able to enforce these rulings everywhere all the time, because we don't have a world government. But the way that these sort of judgments are enforced is ultimately people enforcing them with violence. That's just true.
Sure.
And whether they're accepted or through consent.
So I think the issue, the way that I look at it like differently is, in the United States, this is the point I was making before. In the United States, my goal is to get a good ruling. And once I've got the ruling, then boom, we're good. That's it, I win. I think when people approach international courts or international bodies, you're not looking for good rulings. You're just trying to rally support. That's all you're doing at the end of the day, unless you clearly are fucking up with these international courts, right? Do you agree with that? That's a big difference? Like, at the end of the day, I don't really care. Like, yeah, I'm trying to rally support, because if I get enough people on my side, from there, I can start building coalitions and getting people to do things, either ship me money, or ship me arms, send me money, you know, or whatever, sanction other countries. Sanctioning would be different, right? But like, you understand that, like that, or do you agree with that like the point is to build a coalition, right?
In some respect, I agree, given my ignorance of the international system, but I think that that's because we have an anarchic system. That your goal isn't to, quote, necessarily get the ruling. You want something enforceable because you want something done.
Wait, you're talking internationally or in the U.S. right now?
Internationally, right?
Okay,
internationally. Yeah. The judgment might help you get other countries on board,
yes,
or the important countries on board to enforce something that you want in the world.
Yeah.
But the only reason why the judgment by itself isn't enforceable by virtue of it being in your side is because we live in an anarchic international system.
Well, you say anarchic, but I don't know if I agree with that. Or wait, wait, what did you say? What was the word you used?
Anarchic international system.
Oh, wait, you mean like anarchy? I'm sorry. Wait, what was the word for old and decrepit? I thought you used a different word.
Archaic?
Oh, archaic. Yeah. Okay. You said anarchic.
No,
okay. Not
anarchic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I kind of agree with you. Yeah. But it's because there's competing. It's competing states, right? But okay. To finish my point, then, I'm hearing your responses. To finish my point, if the only reason why we care that much about international law is for coalition building, then at the end of the day, I think we need to look at what the international communities are saying to see if it's actually helping the people who are trying to coalition build. So, for instance, if we look specifically at Israel, and we look at Israel giving the Golan Heights back to Syria, let's say that the UN, does their 780th, binding resolution on Israel, say, fuck you guys, you can't do this. And it's like, okay, we've heard your complaints, you've all voted on this except the US, okay, fine, we give it back, okay? Does this strengthen the position of Israel in the eyes of any of the people that are currently a threat to them?
Maybe not. Maybe that's your argument for why they should not follow it.
Sure. But what I'm saying is that, like, at the end of the day, that's a question, and it's why international law is so much different than like local law. You would never ask this question in like a criminal proceeding. Like, okay, well, if you got a murder conviction here, a lot of people are gonna be real mad, so we got to change how we approach. Right? You're either right or wrong. Either did it. You're either guilty or not. And I think that's the difference for international law. Is this is more about coalition building, and
because you don't trust those countries. You don't trust their judgment.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't trust that they're going to be applied equally. So I'm just going to give you a couple of hypotheticals.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So if let's say there were some question proposed to the General Assembly or whoever's in charge of these things that said, should America be allowed to go into Pakistan to kill Osama bin Laden? And every country except for the United States said no. America should not be allowed to go and capture Osama bin Laden, and Pakistan should be allowed to indefinitely, keep Osama in their borders. Would you be in favor or against America saying, "You guys, we're going to get him anyway"?
Oh man. I'm not gonna have a good answer. I don't have a strong answer. I'll just talk you through it. My gut says no. The idea of the United States doing assassinations in other countries' borders that they don't consent to is probably not a good precedent. However, if the threat was high enough, I would say fuck it. Right? If it was Osama bin Laden before 9/11, then I'd say, well, fuck it. Who cares about Pakistan? Who cares? But if was Osama bin Laden a threat anymore? Probably not. I don't think so. I don't think he was actively commanding or controlling anything. I don't think when we killed him. So is it worth it? I'm also thinking of the assassination we did of Soleimani, who was considered currently a threat, but that was in Iraq without our allies saying yes at all. I don't have a good answer. Yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah,
because these are hard questions. What I'm noticing is you're seeing everything from the perspective of what's in America's interest, right?
Exactly.
You're willing to say, America, don't go after it if if you don't consider him a big threat, and you would be with the international community, presumably because it benefits America to not break those rules. But you're not viewing it from a globalist perspective. You're always viewing it from the perspective of an American, saying,
yes,
does it make sense for us right now to follow what the international community says?
Yeah.
And I see a similar kind of approach to your thinking in Israel, which is, does it make sense from an Israeli perspective to follow these rules?
Yeah, or Mearsheimer realpolitik analysis or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So, but that's kind of your approach going into these questions. Does it benefit America? But it's not your approach for Russia, because you don't like Russia, and it's not your approach from North Korea because you don't like North Korea. So when it comes to that's
wait. Really?
I think if you were to ask, like, does it benefit Russia to listen to the international community before their attack on Ukraine? And the answer is no, it doesn't benefit Russia. If you take the view that Ukraine was a good intervention for Russia and it was in their
yeah, but
interest
like I don't know
invade.
if I don't know if my criticism of Russia comes from like
Violated international norms, let's say. And or
well, no. I'm saying that
like
like for Russia, if you would ask me the same questions about Russia, like should Russia adhere to international law or whatever? First, I would say they already don't. They don't give a Putin doesn't give a fuck about international law. I don't know if the ICC does investigations on Russian soldiers. I'd be curious if that was the case. I haven't looked at it. And also, I can understand Russia's desires and goals for annexing Crimea. Of course, they want to hold on to that port, Sevastopol, and they probably want to. I don't know if they're going to permanently have the land bridge.
Right. Like you wouldn't. If America had kind of like similar interests that were being, well, I don't know, Mexico's fucking around with them or some shit like that, day after tomorrow shit, I think that you would be very sympathetic to America's, if I think people have these hypotheticals before with the Cuban Missile Crisis and with all these things where you're like, okay, America can fuck around in Central America, Latin America because our security was at stake. They were attacking our security.
Yeah, but what hold on. I'm gonna circle back on this Russian thing too because I think I think I've been consistent here the entire time. I have never said, like, I disagree with Russia's stated reasons for invading Ukraine, okay? I think that it was a territorial conquest because Ukraine didn't represent an actual threat to Russia. So if it was a country that represented an actual threat to Russia, I might be more in agreement, like, oh, fuck it, I can see why they would invade. That makes more sense. So I think their claim there is bad. It could be the case, for instance, let's say hypothetically somebody links me a whole bunch of stuff and say, actually, there were no attacks by Syria into Israeli territory. That was all bullshit or blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, oh, in that case, I changed my mind on the Israeli thing. I don't think they have good justification here. But I think that when you talk about these international norms and laws, it is at the end of the day all about what is in the best interest of the country, and that's what they'll do. And because I'm remembering this now, this was one of the big reasons why I got really scared about the heavy sanctions on Russia and the removing Russia from the SWIFT international banking stuff. Because my worried, wait, what?
Why is that? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, because my worry there was if you cut Russia off entirely from the Western world, all right, and we start weaponizing things like SWIFT, at some point, Russia literally has fuck all reason to listen to anything anybody in the West says. They're already sanctioned out the ass. Now they're cut off from fucking SWIFT. Who knows what else they'll weaponize? So my analysis of Russia has been the exact same from Israel and America. What do we do to make it in their best interest to basically to listen? And cutting them off from everything is probably not it, because at some point Russia's just not going to listen at all. Because oh fuck it, we'll go to India, we'll go to China, fuck you. But that's why I'm saying before, like when I analyze Israel's behavior here, I'm asking like, if Russia follows international law here, they have things to gain. A more positive relationship with Europe, positive relationship with America, et cetera, right? If Israel follows international law here, what the fuck do they have to gain? What do they get out of giving anything back to Syria? Nothing. Nobody here is playing by that rule book. Europe does. So I think Russia's in a different position. That'd be my,
But come on. I mean, like,
what?
Let's be frank here. If Ukraine, let's say Ukraine was arming, which they have a right to do, you think, as a country.
Yeah.
But Ukraine did not attack first. And Ukraine, for whatever reason, is making certain statements and saying things like, we love EU and we love America. And guess what? We are building our military because, we want to be ready or something. And whatever they were building could be considered a threat to Russia. Would you be in favor of Russia invading Ukraine in that context?
I mean, if you're asking me if there are a collection of statements or actions that that Ukraine could take that would make me say, I understand Russia's invasion here, and I don't even think I would support Ukraine here. Yeah, of course.
No, but what do you? I mean, like, I would say you have a moral center, right? You have a moral barometer. As who's that guy who's on the Price is Right? I don't know.
Oh, anyway. Steve Harvey. He says that around.
Yeah, moral barometer. You care about the character of the countries that are involved here. You're not gonna. You respect more the self-defense claims by some countries over other countries.
Wait, hold on. We were being tricky here. We're mixing things up.
No.
If Ukraine, because when you were saying Ukraine is making statements, I'm interpreting you saying that as Ukraine is making statements to like invade or fight against Russia.
Or they're building up munitions and they're doing something in a way that it would represent a threat to Russia, but they're not attacking. They're not.
Well, when we say, I'm just trying to understand really specifically. When we say like, are we talking about like mobilizing forces across the Eastern Front, or are we just saying that they're just building up their military?
They're building up their military and they're creating like a huge ass fucking military. They're investing in it. They're making statements that we want our military to be the preeminent military, to be a check on Putin's power. there's some things that Ukraine could do to represent a bigger land threat to Russia, isn't there? Unless you're saying it's impossible for Ukraine to ever be a threat to Russia.
I mean, at some point, there's going to be a thing where I could say that, like, Russia can start to make some demands if they feel uncomfortable. So, for instance, in the later stages, this wasn't even the Cold War, this is post-Cold War, I think 2000s onwards, I think that for instance, we allow Russia into missile installations in the Baltics. We allow them into there to do investigations to make sure that these missiles aren't things that could be used, like, aggressively or fired at Moscow or whatever, right? So so there are things where at some point Russia would be like, hold up, we're getting a little bit uncomfortable here. You guys look like you're about to fuck our shit up. Where we'd be like, okay, well, I think it's okay for Russia to ask for some concessions here, right? But like just building up a military, I don't know if that's like if Russia doesn't have a history of aggression towards, or I'm sorry, if Ukraine doesn't have a history of aggression towards Russia and they're not making statements like we're gonna invade and fuck them up, then I could understand, or I don't think it gives Russia justification to attack them. But Ukraine could do things where be like at some point, oh fuck it, I get it. Like, and I can put a bow on this. We can go back to the very beginning. In '48, when all of the surrounding Arab states wanted to go to war with Israel, I think they were fully justified in that. They felt like they had a pan-Arab nation that was going to pan out. They thought that Britain kind of backstabbed them. They kind of did, and they felt like these European settlers had come in to colonize their land. That kind of happened. If they wanted to fight against that at 48, yeah.
You think that the attack by the Arab nations in the War of 48, that was justified by the Arab nations?
Wholly justified. Yeah, I would say for sure. Yeah.
It was the Israeli response, and was their not surrendering justified?
I think so, yeah. I think both sides have good
what does justification mean in this context? Don't you have some moral outlook independent of...
I don't think justification is only... I don't think justification has to be like unilateral. I think you can have bilateral justifications, right? Like when we look at the Rittenhouse thing, right? One of those guys that ran up to attack him or shoot him, Grosskreutz or whatever, you could argue that like, I think that guy had every justification to run up and think he had to disarm Rittenhouse or thought that Rittenhouse was a threat. And I think Rittenhouse had every right to shoot back at him, right? I think you can have parallel justification here, right?
All right, now I'm going to ask you you don't have to answer it, okay?
Go for it. Yeah, go ahead.
You do not have to answer this.
Yeah.
Were the southern states justified in seceding from the Union?
Were the southern states justified in seceding from the Union? I'm sidestepping the legal arguments because I don't know them thoroughly, but those would inform my decision. But I would argue that they could be, yeah. But I don't know the legal arguments right now. I'll lay out both sides of this, I guess. Like, if it was the case that slavery was okay, and there was a process by which they believed that they had a right to do this, and they felt like that process was being contravened in an unfair, undemocratic way. I don't know all of the different legal arguments that were made up to and relating to slavery in the Civil War or whatever. Then I could see there being a rationale where they're like, well, fuck it, we're seceding from you guys. The same way that the United States seceded from, or not the United, the 13 colonies seceded from the United Kingdom, right? Or England.
Doesn't your intuition about the morality here matter? Like the fact that it's over slavery, the fact that, doesn't that matter to you? Doesn't that this is a secession that's built on the expansion of slavery, that should matter to you, whether these international conflicts are justified? You don't just view it from their perspective. Shouldn't you take are you telling me that if you were in this like an alien observer with all your minds and all of your intuitions kept from current destiny, looking at this conflict, who would you want to win?
I mean, obviously I want the North to win, right? I disagree with the morality there
So
because I think the morality is more on the side of the North, of course. But like I can pick sides. Like I think. I don't like Ukraine, Russia, because Russia's reasons for invading were so dog shit. But like, I could want Ukraine to win, even if they're acting in the wrong or something. Yeah, I think that's possible. This is one of the things, and listen, if you can argue this position, I welcome it. But this is why I have such a hard time interpreting or analyzing international conflict. Because when we live in the United States, all of us, de jure, have a agreement that the U.S. law reigns supreme, and that's what we have to abide by. And if you don't like that, get the fuck out of the country or change the law. Full stop, period, right? But when you get international bodies, two different states bumping up against each other with different legal codes, and this is why the international communities have tried so hard to codify international laws, to have these international courts, is because we've got to appeal to something at the end of the day. Because other than that, I truly don't know. Because then you step into an area where, because I feel like I understand what you're saying. You're saying that like there's got to be some kind of like I don't want to say universal moral code, but there's going to be some kind of moral code that we can appeal to. And I say like, kind of, but like that's a stone's throw away from like, well, we're the world police and we need to go to Iraq because they really need democracy. We need to go to these other countries. We need to go to South America because communism is real bad and they need capitalism. We got to give these people democracy so they can vote because that's way better than, Islamish theocracies, blah, 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 blah. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't for them. I don't know if that's our decision to make. And that's, it's a pain point for me.
Well,
it's
then
difficult.
Can I ask you even a more unfair
go
question?
for it.
I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time.
No, go for it. Ask all the unfair questions.
Is there any war in American history that you think is unjustified?
Here's what I would say is, okay. When you ask me, are American wars unjustified? Okay. It's a different type of question for me than asking like, is a Russian war unjustified? Because as an American, I am going to feel like I can dictate the morality of my country. So for instance, because Nazis and I used to argue about this a lot, people will say like, do you think that the United States should be able to force an ethnic majority? And I would say, no, that's not my value as an American. I don't believe that's an American value. I disagree with that. And then they'll say, oh, well, do you think it's okay when like Japan does it? And I would say, I don't know. That's Japan's decision. I'm not a Japanese citizen. If I was a Japanese citizen, I might have an opinion on that. So when you ask me, are there wars that the United States has done that are unjustified? I'm going to appeal, because I'm an American citizen, I'm going to appeal to my personal moral standard.
That's my point. That's what I think, that you are coming from everything.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong about this, but I think that you're coming from everything from a America first perspective, which is what's in the best interest of America, and then from a second tier, like what's in the best interest of Israel, and how you sort of stand on the conflict comes from that initial approach where you're judging things from the perspective of you as American, or you could see yourself more as an Israeli as opposed to someone who is, I don't know, voting for Hamas or a jihadist, or even a Palestinian who's not in support of those groups. So I think that colors your perspective, and I see it in how you answer things, because it's like, well, it's not in Israel's best interest, or it's not in Israel's, why would Israel do that?
Sure.
And that to me indicates that your initial position is trying to maximize benefits for Israel.
Wait, no. My analysis is just from the perspective of the country we're talking about, right? I never make the analysis of like, Egypt should do this because it's good for Israel, or Syria should do this because it's good for Israel, or the Palestinians should do this because it's good for Israel. Even when I analyze from the perspective of the Palestinians, my main criticism of them is that their current strategy of fighting is not good for Palestinians. It's bad for them. But that's why, for instance, I would support like the Arab states and the 48 war, or the 67 war, maybe the 73 war, right? I can understand why they would fight against Israel. They feel like it's their land. They basically got it yoinked from them by settler colonialists from fucking Europe, and I understand why they would fight for it.
This is so unfair on you, because
what's unfair? No, yeah, keep asking. Go for it. Yeah, you're good.
I'm sorry.
It helps me explore my shit more. So
I do not support Hamas at all.
Sure.
I don't support terrorism at all. Can't the argument? Let me finish it.
Yeah, go for it.
When you hear someone say, well, what is Palestinians supposed to do? You agree in the last 30 years, Israel has been improving in terms of its status in the world.
Yeah.
It's having more relations. It's increasing economically. The Palestinians are relative to the Israelis going down in terms of prestige and in terms of their issue being front and center. Why doesn't your analysis from 48 carry forward to Hamas in 2023?
What do you mean? Why doesn't it carry forward?
So you're very happy to say, yeah, Arabs in 48 were totally justified in attacking Israel in 48. Why are you unwilling to say similar things about violent resistance and say like, I understand it's justified for Palestinians.
Oh, well, because at some point,
at
some point you got to stop. At some point you lose your, the authority fades, right? And you have to move on, unfortunately. Much the same way that I would never, for instance, justify Jewish people settling in Jerusalem in response to their expulsion in AD 136 by fucking Rome or whatever, right? Or by the Romans or whatever.
I don't understand that, Stephen, because and I get it. These are very difficult.
Hold on, wait, stop. Hold on. Let me completely explain what I just said, because what I just said was perfectly analogous, okay? I don't know what you didn't understand. So let me explain this very clearly. Your question was, why doesn't Hamas's justification to fight Israel in 2023 carry through from their justification to fight in 1948? In 1948, at that particular point in time, over the past 40, 50 years, they had been backstabbed by the British, who promised them that land. They had seen Europeans come in to resettle territory that they felt historically belonged to them, and there was a whole bunch of conflict, and the character of that region was changing. Now it was all fucking white Jews, and before it was a collection of Arabs, right? So I think that these things are decent justifications for fighting back for their land. This was our land before, okay, or the Ottoman Empire, whatever the fuck. It sure as fuck wasn't your land, so they have justification to fight there. So for some number of years, I think they're fully justified in fighting. But are they going to be justified in continuing that fight in the year 3000, 5000? 10,000? No, at some point it's going to have to stop. Right now, we can do a modern example, okay? It might be the case, and I think it's looking like that, okay? Hopefully Anna and Dylan don't hear me, okay? Ukraine's probably never getting Crimea back, and they might not get back Donetsk and Luhansk or whatever. They might not.
Right.
And if it is the case that these are peeled off as independent territories or separate states that are really Russian, and Crimea goes back to Russia completely, right? In let's say that carries on then until like 2080 or the year 2150, and then Ukraine's like, we're doing a full-scale invasion of Crimea, I would say, no, it's gone. This is Russian territory now. Like, you can't fight infinitely into the future for your land back because everything breaks at that point internationally. There's probably some period of time where you could fight, and at some point, people settle, things are established, and then you kind of have to move on from there.
But I'm
you
noticing.
Must have faith, Destiny. You must have faith.
Yeah.
I'm noticing a difference in how how you analyze it. So on the one hand, when it came to the 48, yeah, it was in the Arabs' interest to do this. It made sense for them to do it,
and they had the moral authority for it. Yeah.
Oh, that's what I mean. Like, if the moral authority, if that's what's dominating here, what's moral, what's not moral, then why do we even need this analysis of what's in the individual country's best interest? Shouldn't you only be ascertaining like what is the right thing to do here and not like
when it comes to international countries, I don't think so. Even for individuals, I'm not sure if that's the case, right? This is why I say, for instance, like if you've got a concealed carry weapons permit in the United States, I would argue that you have a sort of responsibility of pulling back from conflict, that you shouldn't be starting fights or whatever, right? So like, even if you might be fully within your rights to blow somebody away, I think that you've got a different obligation, and then these obligations might even change if you're like a parent, for instance, right? Maybe you shouldn't go to some place at all, right? If you're a parent, maybe you shouldn't join the military. Maybe you shouldn't own a motorcycle, right? I think your obligations change, not just from what is morally right, but also what is like a part of that consideration is what's healthy for you and your family, or in this form of a nation, you and your people, right?
Yeah, I see a similar kind of perspective from a lot of very, very pro-Israel, very, very pro-Palestine people, that it's very similar to, I think, that your analysis for America, where people are analyzing in these very pro-Israel camps or very pro-Palestine camps, what's in the best interest of Palestine and what's in the best interest of Israel. Why? But we shouldn't do that, right? As we should do what's in the best interest for the region, right? For peace, for stability.
Sure.
Here, for all these people.
Okay, yeah. So I'm wrapping all this up and give you my big macro perspective on that. When I say wrap it up, I don't mean I'm kicking you out. I just mean that this is like my perspective on it, and this is where it all comes from, right? I don't know if we've ever argued, or I did a conversation with Cosmic Skeptic about like my moral system or blah, 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 right? Everything from my analysis starts from like what benefits me as an individual, right? What maximizes my existence, and then from there you build out societies essentially, right? So governments, third-party institutions, blah, blah, blah. All of these things maximize and ensure my rights, and it does for everybody else. So we're all kind of like bought into this with this social contract stuff, right? The reason why I use this analysis is I don't even necessarily consider this a prescriptive one, like, oh, everybody should do this, this is how we should all live. I look at this as a descriptive. At the end of the day, I feel like my analysis of how this works, this is how everybody will act irrespective of how you feel about things. This is the way of the world, and this is what people do. Now, we can take sides on things depending on what our values are. As an American, I do have values that are more subjective than what I would imagine an international standard to be. And I do think America should enforce those values. For instance, Russia invading Ukraine for what I consider to be bad reasons, I don't think they should be allowed to do that, and America should intervene there. But if I was a Russian citizen, I might feel differently, right? So because this is how everybody acts, when I'm looking at bringing people in line on something, my goal is not to say, you're wrong, international courts disagree, that's illegal, blah, blah, blah. If I come at it with the understanding of people are going to do, or nation states are going to do what's in their best interest, we need to make these things in their best interest. And if you look at, like, for instance, Israel has never been threatened with international law to change how they act, but they absolutely give a fuck about what the United States thinks about them. right? No country has ever said like, oh, international law, I'm not going to do it. What they're thinking of is like, well, fuck, I'm a small country. If I break these norms, nobody's going to support me. This is why the United States doesn't give a fuck about the ICC. If one of our soldiers went to Hague, however the fuck you pronounce it, right? We would send a military there and bust them out. We don't give a fuck about the international courts. But that's because it doesn't serve America's interest to. We think that our Constitution...
As an American citizen, I think you should have a stake in how you think America should wave its magic wand. Like,
I agree, and I do have a stake in that, right? Yeah,
right,
I do.
Right.
Yeah.
So if someone were to ask you, do you agree or disagree with America signing on to a resolution declaring these settlements as illegal under international law? Would you support America under your Mr. President, Mr. Bonnell? Would you agree with America signing on to a resolution that declared those settlements illegal? Yes,
the calculation that I would weigh is I would say America seeing us as a loyal ally, assuming they do, is more important than sending a message to the rest of the world that we also join them in condemning the settlements. And I think that that serves my interests and Israel's interests, maybe even the Palestinian interests down the line, right? That if it was the case that the U.S. flipped their position on it and they started becoming a hardcore critic of Israel, well, at that point, who the fuck does Israel listen to? Well, fuck it. If the United States is not going to support us, if they pull back their $3 billion a year, well, then fuck it. Maybe we will actually do this shit because we don't care about the U.S. anymore, right? I think that holding on to those diplomatic ties are so important, and losing them, like what I said earlier, like cutting Russia out of SWIFT and sanctioning the fuck out of everybody. Look at Iran, right? Is Iran any closer to being a U.S. ally today than they were 20, 30, however many years ago, right? I don't know if our sanctioning the fuck out of them has helped at all. Or what about North Korea? Are they any closer to coming to us, right? Having these like negative or these positive punishments, like attacking with soft power, right? As opposed to building relationships and then leveraging that. I feel like when things are in people's best interest, that's the best way to guide them to make good decisions, and not just like throwing international law at them when following the international law isn't going to help them at all, you know?
But I mean, like, if Israel
don't say come
went on
go ahead
went on like a civilian, like I said before, where it's just irrefutable that this is a campaign designed to kill as many civilians as possible, and we found out that that's actually their intent, and we have irrefutable proof of that, you would sign up for a statement, wouldn't you, being like, this is horrible?
Yeah, we've already agreed to that. There are actions that Israel can take where I'm like, this is damaging. But again, my view there is still going to be from a U.S. perspective. This is damaging our credibility now to sign off on this, right? We're not going to support you. If the death toll in the Gaza Strip was 150,000, now you're getting, not only you're getting U.S. criticism, you might lose your funding, right? Yeah, of course.
I'm scared of that hypocrisy because, or the potential accusation of hypocrisy, because there are times when this administration, America, imagine that it were in the hands of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, for all his faults, he says that he's doing things in America's interest. He put America first.
Sure.
Why, in that context, if you believe that Trump would do that, maybe you just don't believe that Trump is actually doing that, why wouldn't you vote for Trump if he's doing everything to maximize America's outcomes?
Because I disagree that he's maximizing the outcomes, right? But remember also, and I'm not trying to play a trick on you here, remember it's different because as an American citizen, I have a personal stake in what my country does, and I want to direct it. I vote for that. I want to change what my country, I have a strong opinion on that. But when I think of other countries, I'm thinking in terms of like what ensures like the world order, what functions best as part of like the American hegemonic blah, 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 right? These are the things that I'm thinking of, not like Israel should do this because it's the best thing for Israel. And
as
blah,
a
blah, blah.
function for American power.
Essentially,
so we're only doing these rules to make our allies happy and to have a coalition where we can be the unipower and stay in control.
Yeah. And I would argue even people that are part of that are the same, right? When France or Germany or Spain or any of these other countries are doing things, it's not so that they can lead, it's so that they can remain in good standing with their allies and so that they can benefit from that diplomatic and military umbrella, right? From the UN, the EU, NATO, or whatever, that they're benefiting from that by
that is kind of a realist perspective, isn't it? I mean, that is kind of pseudo-realism here.
A little bit, sure, yeah.
A flavor of realism, because what you're saying essentially is that we should never trust America, like when it tries to say we're intervening for humanitarian benefits. That is a notion that should be extinct. That every intervention should be for its own benefit, and we should never intervene for humanitarian purposes unless it will benefit America.
So I understand what you're saying, but I think one, this is the unimportant part, that's kind of true. But two, more importantly, I think that's how everybody already views it. Do you remember when is it Venice? Was Guaido the one in Venezuela or Bolivia?
Guido? Oh, the guy.
The guy.
Yeah, in Venezuela.
Yeah, in Venezuela. Remember when, and in Venezuela, it wasn't Maduro and Morales. Bro, I mix up the Venezuelan Bolivian shit so much. It was Maduro, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, wasn't Maduro rejecting U.S. humanitarian aid because they thought that the United States was sending that aid at the request of, was it Guido, in order to strengthen his claim to being a better leader for Venezuela? Like,
I'm not sure about
that.
Yeah,
so I mean, like, oh fuck, okay, I wish you, yeah. But like, I'm saying that like the rest of the world already kind of does operate in this way, right? If we were to look at the places that the United States send aid to, do we send aid to the places that need it the most, or do we send aid to the places that like it also benefits? Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah, I think that's okay. If you think that the world operates best where we have an assumption, there are people who I know who say things like, we should live in a world where the assumption is that every country is out for themselves.
Yes, which I agree with. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there potentially, it doesn't have to be as black and white.
No, I mean, there's going to be like
this.
Yeah, of course. Like, for instance, like the United States and the principles of this country are going to be different than like an authoritarian dictatorship who they might like, you know, if it was Russia during the Cuban Missile Crisis, they would have invaded Cuba and taken over it and they would have annexed it. Or at least it would have been an independent territory or whatever they were at. 100%, right? Like different countries will have different values. I agree with that for sure. But largely speaking, countries are going to act in accordance with the things that are benefiting them or their perception of them and their values the most.
That's a descriptive statement that countries are going to.
I believe so, yeah.
Or do you mean to say countries should?
They are.
Should be
well,
doing that?
They are, and arguably they should. And I would argue that that's understood as well. Because if you, I don't know if this is game theory or prisoner's dilemma or whatever, but like if you're in an area where you've got 10 people and you're the 11th person and all 10 of them are operating for themselves and then you don't, you're going to get fucked over every single time, right?
Sure.
And then and then that situation was, let's say you're all fighting for food, right? And it's 11 of you and all 10 of them are for themselves and you're not for anybody and now you're fucked or whatever. Maybe you have principles there and you're like, well, fuck it, I'll go hungry sometimes, but I really want to have these values. Well, what if you have a family, right? Like a nation has people, right? Is it worth it for you to say, we're going to do what's the best for the world, even if everyone else around us is trying to fuck us over? Like at some point, you've got a responsibility to citizen people. Yeah,
I think that's the logic of, to be clear, I think that's the logic of Russia, where and it's the logic of a lot of these other imperialistic kind of countries where they're maximizing their own benefit and they're expansionists because it's in their best interest and it's what they want. It's maximizing what they feel is the best for their countries. But like we wouldn't be in support if America were next to a small country and annexing that country would be in the benefit of America. But they have their own democracy there, but it's only a country of like 1 million people. And it's irrefutable that annexation would help America in that context.
Sure.
Wouldn't we be against that? Because we think that there's some
but again, remember, you're like cheating because you're asking me as an American. I would disagree as an American because I've got like a morality for my country, and I would hope that we would act a little better than just being fully, selfish and horrible, right? Yeah. But I would say, like, when I disagree with things like relating to Russia, or when I disagree, like, for instance, like, I'm very critical of like Mearsheimer and all of his analysis related to everything in Europe past the year 1991 and everything related to Russia. My issue with him wasn't just that, like, oh, countries will do what they can do to protect themselves. My issue is that, like, I don't believe that Russia was invading Ukraine because they were scared of NATO. I think that Russia invaded Ukraine because they wanted the territory, they wanted the influence, and they didn't like the idea of Ukraine not being Belarus 2.0, and they wanted to form their nation.
That would be legitimate.
Yeah.
If that were a actual goal of Russia. Russia thought that the expansion, not for defensive reasons, but because Ukraine was vulnerable.
Yeah.
And if you think that countries should act in their best interest, then why would this be a wrong action?
Because I don't think it's in their best interest to do so. Much the same, I don't think it's in the Palestinians' best interest to do so. I think the calculation is incorrect. I don't think Russia is strengthening their position post-Ukraine invasion. I think they're in a weaker position now. I could be wrong in that, but economically, militarily, and just in overall standing of the world, I think Russia's in a weaker position now, so they're not even accomplishing what they want. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
That'd be my feeling on it, but.
All right, my brother. How you doing otherwise? Doing good?
Yeah, just chilling, yeah.
Chilling? All right.
How's life been you? How are you doing? Are you in New York right now?
Yeah, New York. It's good. Everything's chill.
Have you thought of, are you like switching jobs or anything, or?
No. I like practice.
Okay.
Yeah. But next time you're around, let me know. Are you traveling?
Yes. Fuck, I need to book shit for that, yeah. I think I go to California on the, I got a debate on the 7th, and then I come back, I think, on the 10th or 11th, yeah.
Nice. Well, enjoy your time, and hope you have a good stream.
Yeah. I love you. It's been fun. Stay safe, man.
Yeah, stay safe.